Okay, Vino Madonai Nohenu Alenu Maase Adenu Kone Na Alenu Maase Adenu Koneu. I'd like to dedicate this year today, Lilun Shmat, Shaul Ben Aser, Ruach Adonai Tinechenu Began Eden. Okay, so we're back, thank God, in our regular digs, so we won't have internet issues today. So I want to apologize ahead of time, from last week's class, that the internet was really bad, and I didn't realize it. I got messages as the class was going on, but I couldn't really find another space, so I was stuck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. So even though last class was 82, this is going to be 83. This is going to be 83a, which is going to be a repetition, in the beginning at least, of what we were discussing last week for all those who were not able to attend in person, but couldn't understand it or pay attention or had the patience to listen for the class last week. Okay. So it says over here, we're back in the Shaare Orah. We're on page Resh Vav in the version of the book that we have on the thumbnail. And it's talking about, of course, we're still talking about the midah of the Yesod, the El Chai, right? The Tzaddik. These are all words, interchangeable words for all the same sphira. And we spent a lot of time discussing the word Tov, how the word Tov is also a remez, a sod. The sod of Tov, again, is for the word of Yesod, or the word of the Tzaddik. V'lif'amim nikret midah zo sechel Tov. And this midah of Yesod is called sechel Tov. Lefi shemin hamidah hazot yikanes adam la'aspaklaria ha'me'ira. Because through this doorway, through this midah, a person is going to be able to come to what's called the aspaklaria me'ira, the clear lens. Ubemidat el chai, and the midah of el chai, yaskil adam derech, a person will have haskala, not haskala with the negative connotation, but will have sechel, right? Sechel tov, right? We'll have sechel. Derech lihikanes veladat ulihitbonen ulihithakem bamitat yudke vavke yitbarach. So a person will have the ability to have contemplation and to have wisdom and to have knowledge about the amitah, the truth of yudke vavke yitbarach, which is really the goal of life in this world, is to have a relationship with Hashem, to have a relationship with yudke vavke, and also to be able to know Him to the best of our abilities, to be able to, yes. Good question. I don't know. We have to see. It's a good question. See if we discuss it on the bottom. There's a discussion about the clear lens. So it says, the Rambam clearly says, and this is that all the other prophets saw through a cloudy lens, aspaklaria lo me'ira, whereas Moshe Rabbeinu was the only prophet that was able to see through the aspaklaria me'ira. There is a discussion because we see the name Panim el Panim is also the Jewish people on Har Sinai when they were receiving the Aseret HaDibrot. It also says Panim el Panim Dibarti Imachem. In Devarim, I think it says that, yes? So there are some that say that at Har Sinai, all of the Jewish people had the level of Aspaklaria Me'ira, which fits very nicely with the Midrash that says what happened. No, that they died.
Oh, they died, yeah.
Right? To understand. So they got an appreciation of what Moses' prophecy was like every day of his life, okay? And they couldn't even, we couldn't handle that even for a couple of words of Hashem. Imagine Moshe, they all see that Moshe, that's why if you think they never doubted, we talked about this before, they never doubted anything Moses said. Again, it doesn't say Vadaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, a point.
They asked that Hashem tells them directly that they won't.
I got it. But let's think about it this way. It never says, oh, Moses, did you really hear Para Aduma? I don't believe you. It doesn't say that. It says, Vadaber Hashem. They never said that. They never said, Vadaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Wait, you didn't really say that. Korach's objection was because there was no pasuk saying that El Tzafan, the two younger sons, of, I'm blanking on it. Sorry about that. The ones who were appointed to be the heads of the Shevet, right? That Korach was upset that they skipped over him and went to the fourth son, right? Because Korach is the Bechor of the second son, right? And Moshe Rabbeinu, when he picked the leaders of the Shevet of Levi, he skipped over Korach and went to the first two sons of the last son of Levi, right? So that was the problem. Nowhere does it say that God said that. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe lemor. Please appoint this one. Okay, we have an appointment. We're going to read 2 parashot for now of Betzalel. No, who objected to Betzalel, a 13-year-old young man, being the artisan of the Mishkan? Who objected? Nobody. Why not? What? There's no other artists around? Because it says Vayidaber Hashem Moshe lemor. When it says that, means that there was no discussion. They knew it came from Hashem. How did they know? Well, first of all, they recognized that their ability of prophetic ability was much lower than Moses because they died. As Moses can go there and live just fine, talk to God, come down, go back and talk again. It's like having a sandwich. You know what I mean? Chas v'shalom. Who?
The ones that went to a higher level than permitted, or
we'll get to that. Hold on, that's a separate question. Okay, that's not Daven Avihu. You're saying yes? Okay, let me finish what I'm saying, then I'll take your question. Okay, so let's understand this. Why didn't they ever say, "Oh, really? Did you really hear Para Aduma? Did you really hear Shemitah?" You don't say that anywhere. So Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. What does that mean? Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, right? You have the word dibur, which is tough, and you have lemor, which is soft. So when Moshe was given the Amirah, it was through dibur, mipi hagevura, right? When he gave it over to Klal Yisrael, how did he give it over? Amirah, okay? But there's another yesod here, and that all of the Jewish people in Har Sinai heard the voice of God. Whatever that means, let's leave that alone. Let's see in the Pshat with the Tzod, right? They heard the voice of God. Moshe Rabbeinu, what does it say? The Shekhinah would talk from his garon, from his throat, which means when Moses was giving over a halacha, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor, when he was telling the people the halacha, what voice were they hearing? They were hearing the voice of the Shekhinah, the voice that they heard on Har Sinai. That's why they never doubted anything Moses said by Deber Hashem or Moshe lemor, because they knew the voice of the Shekhinah. When Moses saw someone in the morning and said, good morning, Master Moses, and he answered, good morning to you, that was not the voice of the Shekhinah. And think about it this way. We understand about Moshe Rabbeinu. We learned early on in Shmot, Moshe Rabbeinu was kvad peh, kvad lashon. Yes? He didn't want to go talk to Paro. Why? Kvad peh v'kvad lashon anochi. What happened to his kvad peh v'kvad lashon afterwards? What happened to it?
He got healed.
Okay, he got healed in Sinai, maybe just like everybody else. Or another idea is when he was giving over the Torah, the halachot, it was from the Shekhinah. The voice of the Shekhinah is Garon, which had no impediment whatsoever. It's perhaps when Moses said good morning, maybe he still had a little bit of a lisp. But the Shekhinah was speaking from his Garon. That's why there was no doubt. Since they heard the voice of the Shekhinah on the mountain, and then they heard by Deber Hashem Moshe lemor, Daber al Bnei Yisrael, he's speaking to them. What voice is that? That's the voice of the Shekhinah talking. Because they said, Daber ata iman v'nishma'a, right? You should speak. What does it mean you should speak? They heard the Shekhinah through the Keli of Moshe Rabbeinu.
So he went to the channel.
That is exactly correct. Okay? So your question is about which people that died. You're talking about Nadav and Avihu? Who else? They all died. It says they all died.
Second one they died.
First and second.
They died twice? Yes.
They died twice. There's a discussion amongst the rabbis. Did they hear all 10? Or they only hear the first 2, right? Because in Devarim, in Parashat Be'et Hanan, when we have more information given to us about Ma'amad Har Sinai, there it says, Daber ata v'nishma'u, right? Then we will hear, right? Daber ata, you speak. So from that point on, from the third Dibran on, it was, according to most of the poskim, it was from Moshe, not directly from the voice of Shammai. But how did that come out? It came out through the Shekhinah and Moshe's voice. So the voice they heard. The difference is the voice needed another lens. we use the analogy, we use a metaphor of light. Okay? Sound is not as good as a metaphor for the shefa because sound has a more physical component than light does, even though light has a physical component as well. Neither of these are good. They're not, none of them are perfect analogies. There can't be a perfect analogy. It's the closest we can in the physical world. So we say or, we refer to or. Or is a problem because or has physical properties. You put it through a prism, it breaks up into 7, yes? Which is another discussion for another day. But that being said, or has physics, wave and particle. There's a wave theory, which is energy, and particle is not energy. Particle, so light has a behavior of both. Correct. Okay, but that's not the sense with the Shefa of Hashem. The Shefa from the Shamayim is all spiritual. It's not physical at all. That's why light doesn't. It's not a perfect analogy. It's the closest we can come. Okay, very good. Sound also. Let's understand sound. Even though sound is more physical, when I said that the sound required a lens, it's the same idea. Again, not using a lens from a visual point of view. It needed a filter. When they heard the sound directly from, right, Shamayim, they died. Daber atav v'nishma'u is we need a filter. We need more of a filtration because we're not spiritually prepared to hear that intensity.
So what kind of death was that?
The same kind of death as everybody has when the soul separates from the body.
Why wouldn't it separate from the body like in the book?
Okay, good question. Okay, that gets to Nadav and Avihu for 1 second. If you take the soul alone, okay, if you can kavyachol separate it from the body for a brief period of time, what is the soul's desire? To connect to God. The soul doesn't particularly care whether or not it's connecting to God as a disembodied soul or as a connected soul to the body, yes? We understand that in this world, the soul is put into this world so they can do Torah, mitzvot, and ma'asim tovim, because without these physical activities, that's how we raise up. But what does the Talmud say? When Hashem goes to the soul in the Shemaim and says, by the way, you're going to go down there, the soul doesn't want to go. But what? It's forced to go. Al korchach, it was forced to go into the body. The soul is forced to go into the body. And it's also forced to leave because then it gets accustomed to being there. It doesn't want to leave. All the mitzvot it's did, hopefully, but all that kind of stuff, yes? But really, if you take the soul out, the soul wants to connect to God. And the body, if you think about it, is an impediment to connecting to God. In some ways, it's a vehicle to connect, and in some ways, it prevents connection. The Avraham kaved me'od b'kesef v'zahav v'chesef v'mikneh v'kesef v'zahav, right? That's what it is. What does it mean Avraham is kaved me'od? When a person has lots of cash, are they heavy? No. The more money a person has, generally, the lighter they feel. I can take vacation, I can do this, I can do that. All these wonderful, having money is freedom, right? Well, to Avraham Avinu, it wasn't freedom. It was kaved me'od, which means, look, understand, it doesn't mean it was heavy just. It was heavy because kesef is heavy spiritually.
Responsibility.
It's heavy because it's part of this world. Anything that's part of this world is kaved me'od. The Torah, since it's not from this world, it's from the Shamayim, that gives a person, lifts a person up. But things of this world bring a person down. The body brings the soul down. Why does the soul in the body? As soon as the body stops functioning, what happens to the soul? Leaves. It doesn't, forget, it doesn't want to sit tight. That's it. Especially if a person lived his life properly, Torah, mitzvot, and ma'asim tovim, the soul's ready to go.
Why can't the soul just go willy-nilly out and out?
Well, that's what happens. What I said yesterday during Seudah Shlishit is what protects a person who everybody wants to get close to God. Yes, that's why we're here. We're here to learn Torah. We're here to study Shaare, Orah, so we get closer to Hashem. Yes? But we don't want to get that close. Agreed? I don't think anybody's ready to leave today. Yossi, you following?
Your neshama wants to leave.
So the point is that when the soul, as the soul gets closer and closer, there comes a point in time when it doesn't want to stay. It wants to, just like a person, harotzeh kesef lo yisba kesef. In the physical world, a person has 1 million, he wants 2 million. He has 2 million, he wants 10 million. He has 10 million, he wants 100 million. There's no end, right? On the spiritual side, the neshama is the same. The more it wants to get closer to Hashem more and more every time. It's not going to, and if it comes a point in time where closeness to God means leaving the body, it's out of there.
Unless you have something to tether it down.
So it has to have to tether it down. So, or you can look at it another way. Tethering it down, that's what Rabbi Kaplan says in book on meditation. He says that when the Kabbalists would meditate, they would go up into different floors of the house as they develop their meditation techniques. Yes. And then he's recommended that you always have something like a piece of cake or some type of fruit that you like right there. So this way, what happens? If you feel the soul is ready to leave, you quickly grab the piece of cake, it brings you back down. Which means the soul has a desire only to go up. It does like a fire. The fire goes up. It doesn't want to go down. It wants to only go up. Very good. They left. Well, one became crazy. One died. What does it mean died? He sinned?
He just got close. Yeah.
He got close.
He said, mind. He said, it's not in it.
So why does one of the reasons a person, when they get close, they don't survive that relationship is even if they don't make any mistakes per se, because mistakes in that situation are very dangerous. The closer a person is to God, the more risky mistakes are, right? That's why people living in the land of Israel, when they sin, is much worse than people living outside the land of Israel, because you're sinning in the palace of the king, okay? But that being said, there's a protection that we have when we get close. What is that protection? If you look at Moshe Rabbeinu, he wore that protection every time, because Moshe Rabbeinu went in and he didn't die. It never says when does he die? He dies at the end of 120 years, right? He doesn't die. He's talking with God all day long, and he's not dying. Why not?
Humility.
Anava. Because he recognizes that his entire reason that he has this connection to God is not for him. It's for
Personal gain of Bnei Yisrael.
Klal Yisrael. Lech red ki shichet amecha. God told him from the beginning, the only reason you're here is for them. Lech red ki shichet amecha. We can learn that in different ways, but look at Rashi. You don't belong here because they're sinning. You're here because of them. Since they're not worthy, bye-bye. Right? We see later on in the Torah, it says, Vayelech Moshe. Right? Vayelech Moshe. What does it say over there? Vayelech Moshe. Lo uchal latzet velavo, it says. I am no longer able to come and go. Meaning what? I know it's a couple of parshas ago. We forgot about it already, huh? No. Right before he dies. Vayelech Moshe. Then it says a couple of pesukim later. Lo uchal latzet velavo. Ki amar hash. What does that mean? So Rashi asks a great question. What does it mean, lo uchal latzet velavo? So the simple answer, you might think initially, he's 120 years old, for heaven's sake. He's got pain in his back, he has pain in his knees, got osteoarthritis, he got a little diet. I mean, he's done. There comes a point where the kli is broken, it can't function anymore. But there's a problem with that. What's the problem? Lo chahata eno velo nasleho. It says in Vazot HaBracha, when it's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu dying, what does it say? His eyes were not weakened, and his mouth was still wet, which means it wasn't dry. Very commonly, as people get older, what happens? Their eyesight diminishes. We see in the Torah, Yitzchak Avinu, right? And we know the mouth dries out. A person when they're younger can go out without drinking water all day long. But as you get older, it becomes harder. You get a decrease in your production of saliva. This is part of the aging process. The Torah says, Lo chahata eno velo naslecho. So Rashi says it can't be that he was physically unable to lead the people. He could have led the people for another 100 years. Lechem lo achalti umayim lo shatiti. Right? What's the answer? He has no more reshut. The permission from Shamayim was taken, and why? Why doesn't Moshe Rabbeinu have reshut anymore? They don't deserve him anymore. They don't deserve him. So they got Yoshua. Now, Yoshua is a great number 2, but he's still the number 2. So lo uchal latzet v'lavo, Hashem tells Moshe, you can stay another 100 years, but they're not worthy for you anymore, so you got to go.
What did they do to be not worthy?
What did you read? Sefer B'midbar?
Well, is there one thing that...
In the 2 months of Sefer Devarim,
yes,
what does Moshe Rabbeinu spend about 70% of his time doing? No. What does Moshe Rabbeinu in the last 2 months of his life in Sefer Devarim spend 70% of his time doing?
That's kind of...
Musar! He's telling them what they did wrong. Begins in Devarim and continues on and on. Mamrim heitem im Hashem, ha'azinu hashamayim v'adabera. It's all Musar. Yes?
It's tochacha. Did they accept it?
It doesn't make a difference. What is he giving them tochacha for? For all the misdeeds, which means they no longer deserve Moshe Rabbeinu to go in. It's so, if you want to make the analogy, Yishaya. Yishaya is probably, if you read the first chapter of Yishaya, you get nervous because you think the whole book of Yishaya is going to be tochacha. In fact, it's only maybe 3 or 4 chapters of Yishaya that's tochacha. The rest of Yishaya is all nehama. Right? If you look at the 7 parashot, the haftarot that we do after Tisha B'Av, every one of those 7 is from what book? No, they're all Yishaya, every one of them. Why? Because Yishaya is the prophet of consolation, with the exception of the first chapter, Chazon Yishaya. Why is there consolation? Because at Yishaya's time, which is about 150 years before the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, there was still opportunity to fix so that the temple wouldn't be destroyed. You get to Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah is not the prophet of consolation. Yirmiyah is the prophet of beatings. Okay? And Yehezkel also. Yehezkel also has tremendous at the end because he's talking about the future. But the prophecies that are given to the people there specifically are all tough. That's why they wanted to lock up Yirmiyah. That's why they tortured the guy. Why? Because Yirmiyah is after Menashe. After Menashe, it was already broken to the point where it could not be fixed. It could be mitigated, but not completely fixed. Me'uvat lo yuchal litkon. Okay? And that's the difference. So we see when Moshe Rabbeinu at the end, the last 2 months, he's giving them Musar. Why is he giving them Musar? Because they haven't behaved so nicely. Listen, they did wonderful things too. I don't want to knock Klal Yisrael. They did amazing things. But Moshe Rabbeinu is giving them Musar, and very, very strong. I mean, that's why some people read Devarim. There are some people that's what they do. They study Sefer Devarim. It's amazing. First, it's beautiful. I love Sefer Devarim. Exactly. Hoshana Rabbah. Why do you read the Sefer Devarim? Hoshana Rabbah is the last opportunity for Teshuvah, which began in Rosh Chodesh Elul. It's the 51st. Na. Hoshana. Nun Aleph. 51. It's the 51st day after Rosh Chodesh Elul. 51st, yes. 1 second. No. 1 second.
30 and 23.
What am I missing?
21.
Yeah, 30 of Elul. 10 of till Kippur, it's 40, right? Then you have 5 days, 45. And then you have 6. Hoshana Rabbah is 6 into the 7. That's 51. Okay, my math is correct. Thank God, Baruch Hashem. So meaning what? So that's the last opportunity. And what do we read? Devarim. Why are we reading Devarim? Musar. It's not just because the next day is going to be, Shmini Atzeret, which in Eretz Yisrael they read end of Devarim, and there's another reason we're reading Devarim. It's a Teshuvah. And what is part of the Hoshana? People will stay up late. Hoshana Rabbah. What do you do? Selichot. Not the full Selichot, but you do Selichot. Why? Same idea. So you read the Musar and you do Selichot. Yes? Okay. We went a little off the topic, but that's okay. No problem. Any questions on that so far? Okay.
Okay, at the end of Sefer Devarim, that's when they lost then they weren't worthy of having Moshe as their leader.
I would suggest after the Shittim, they lost the ability to have Moshe be the leader. The Shittim.
It's a Shittim incident.
Va'etchanan el Adonai ba'etahi lemor. What's ba'etahi? What's ba'etahi? So some of the Farshim say it was by the war of Sichon and Og, right, which is in Parashat Chukat, okay? And he's already asking to go into the land of Israel. And Hashem tells him, no. One might say, why is Hashem telling him no? Because Hashem knows something else is coming. That's simple level. If we look at we know from the beginning already, Moshe Rabbeinu is not going in. That's a whole other class for another day.
There's going to be another.
Because God knows there's something called the Shittim. He knows they're going to sin in the Shittim with Bnot Moav. So if you want to say Ba'etahi is when he's having victory, because Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, oh my God, I'm having all these victories. I'm conquering land on the other side of the Jordan River, which really technically is part of the greater Israel, shall we say. Yes, it's part of the, right? I'm conquering this land, right? I'm having a lot of success here. Is it possible that the decree was removed that they're not going to go into the land of Israel? So what's Ba'etahi? It's by after he beats Sichon and Og. Really? Only 24,000? You sure about that? You sure there was only 24,000 there?
Yes.
Okay. How many? The 24,000 that died, how did they die? Magefa. No one else died? Just the Magefa and that's it? The Mugifu, as the Hungarians would say. The Mugifu. Just the Mugifu? Just the Magefa?
The Levim had also.
And the Levim killed each one of the Shaare Me'ot, Shaare Arafim, Shaare Me'ot, Shaare Hamishim, Shaare Asarot. Each one of them were required to kill 2 people. Add it up. I once did the math on this. 1/3 of the Jewish population died in the Shittim. Between the Magefa, I did the math once on this. I have to find it. I think I have a class on it, actually. And I calculate how many Jews there were, because it's very interesting. The 600,000 number seems to stay the same. You know, they have 600,000 in the beginning. They have 600,000 afterwards, right? Well, you mean to tell me 40 years in the desert, there was no activity? I doubt that very highly. There were like 900,000. Stop. They lost 300,000 people in the Shittim. Wow. Not according to me, according to the Pasuk. The Pasuk doesn't count them in a number. The Magefa, it says there were 24,000 that died in the Magefa. But there were many more that died. It's 1/3 of the population. It was 900,000, was reduced to 600,000. It becomes 300,000 killed. Between Magefa and between the Shoftim killing them. Do we realize the tragedy that was?
This is also Tliyah, right? They had to leave him hanging. This is that.
I know what you're talking about. Anyway.
But it goes like that. The same thing with Mitzrayim. 80% died out.
Okay, but the difference in Mitzrayim, they died because they weren't ready to leave. They weren't ready to accept the Torah. Weren't ready to leave. There's a big difference. Why is it by Chet HaEgel, 3,000 people died? By the Shittim, 24,000 people died. By Magefa, let's leave what the words of the Torah. Forget about the 300,000 I just told you about, which is true. Why Chet HaEgel is only 3,000 and and over there it's 24,000? Simple answer is God would rather have people be having idolatry rather than having adultery.
They're both part of the Abal. Yeah, right.
They're not equivalent. Bilam, when he gave Balak advice, didn't say, by the way, the God of Israel hates idolatry. Didn't say that. He said the God of Israel hates zima. That's what he said. Bilam knows. Okay, so we can see clearly just in the difference in how many people died. Cheta Egel 3,000. Disgusting sexual behavior, abominable sexual behavior. Zima means filth. The word filth, and it's usually refers zima is usually this type of zima is one in the Acharemot. It says zima. Anyway, I think it says when a man has relations with two sisters in their lifetime, zima. Use the term zima. Balkor, am I correct about that? Yes. Okay. So that's called zima, which means filthy, disgusting. They're all disgusting. Okay. Now, but again, that was before Matan Torah. What is the difference between the Jewish people at Har Sinai and the Jewish people at the Shittim? Big difference. The people at Har Sinai, how many days of Torah study did they have? Whatever was taught from the Mara, which is after the 15th of Iyar. So we're talking maybe 15, 17, 18 days of Torah. They learn Shabbat, they learn Para Aduman, they learn Dinim. Okay? I mean, that was semester number 1. By the time they get to Har Sinai, they're novices in Torah knowledge, okay? They're not experts, right? Moshe Rabbeinu goes to the mountain, doesn't come down for 40 days, right? How much Torah did they learn when Moshe was gone? None. I don't know. Did they learn any? I don't know. Maybe they read Sefer Torah, what was given so far. I don't know. Okay? Maybe. But they're okay. So let's play that out. So we'll add 18 days from the 15th of Iyar, say until Shavuot, or 20 days, okay? And they had 40 days that they learned. So total, they learned Torah for 58 days, yes? When they're at the Shittim, how many years had they been studying Torah? 40 years. And this is what you're going to do? Big difference. If you think about it from the concept of Chilul Hashem, not everybody's measurement of Chilul Hashem is the same. A person who's Am Haaretz, he can be Mehalel Hashem, but it's usually a more obvious thing. When the Talmud talks about Talmid Chacham, what is the standard for a Talmid Chacham doing Chilul Hashem?
It's risky. It's sensitive.
You understand the question? The
The
bar is lower. He goes to the butcher, takes meat, and doesn't pay. Not that he's not going to pay. He's not a gazlan, but he doesn't pay. I'll pay you tomorrow. I'll pay you the next day. That is Hilul Hashem for Talmid Chacham. Wow. So the standard is not the same. So by the time they were 40 years in the desert and they already learned so much Torah, you mean to tell me this is what you're going to do? You're going to do something worse than Chet HaEgel? Okay. See how that works for you. And this is what Devarim is coming into. This is after they did the Shittim in the 40th year, in the last year. I think it was like 7 months before Moshe Rabbeinu died. So that's why Moshe Rabbeinu put on the, and Devarim is all Musar. Okay? And now we understand why Va'et Hanan, Hashem says to Moshe, no, you cannot go in. I mean, he couldn't make teshuvah for his mistakes? Really? I thought teshuvah is available for everybody. Not available for Moshe Rabbeinu? It wasn't because of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu made teshuvah for his mistakes, but they weren't worthy for him.
So Dor HaMidbar.
They weren't worthy to have them. Dor HaMidbar was worthy for Moshe Rabbeinu. The door of Hachnasat Haaretz was not worthy of Moshe Rabbeinu. In the Shamayim, God is revealing to Moshe Rabbeinu, but over there, that there's going to be another redemption because there's going to be another galut. God is hinting the picture in the Shamayim, shall we say? Yes.
So, why were the most amount of people killed off
They weren't ready to leave. I mean, Yetziat Mitzrayim, the problem with the Yetziat Mitzrayim is very simple. Nobody could be left behind. How many people left behind in Mitzrayim? I'm talking about living people. Zero. No Jews were left behind in Egypt. People who, by the 9th plague, or after the 8th plague, were mentally not going to want to leave Egypt, they got to die.
And they were also told that they were.
And if they're not ready to leave Egypt, that means they're also not ready to accept the Torah. They're not ready to accept the Torah. Har kigigit. Okay? Person's not willing to accept the Torah, that's called mavet. The Torah is called etz chaim hi lemahazikim ba. A person has not enough to have the Torah. A person has to be mahazik. What does mahazik mean? To hold it, to grasp it. And that's why people make a big mistake when they make aliyah. They go aliyah to Sefer Torah, and they grab the case. No.
You have to grab the cloth with the
You
tongue?
have to grab the Torah. It's a question about the Ashkenazim, since
the
technically they're holding the Etz
And
Chaim.
that's holding the scrolls.
Okay, so maybe they have a little pshara because it's Etz Chaim, but really, the Torah is not the wood. The Torah is the cloth. So you have to have a cloth. You use your talet. You don't hold it arum, right? You don't hold it naked, right? You have to hold the Sefer Torah with. But you hold this. So a person gets aliyat to Sefer Torah. You don't grab the case. You send the chazan away a little. Is going to be Baal Koreh. Baal Koreh should step aside a little bit. And the person who gets the aliyah takes his talet or takes whatever there is on top. And what does he do? He grabs each one of the amudim. Baruch ata Hashem, Baruch ata Hashem, Asher b'harbana mikol ha'amim, mahazik, etz chaim hi lemahazikim ba.
Grab with one hand, right? With one
No.
hand. No.
Why one hand? You have two hands.
The cloth is
You have
big
two
enough to
hands.
drape it over the scrolls.
And then if you want to be creative,
While the reading is taking
no.
place. The reading
I'm
is
talking about
taking
when you're
place.
making the
That's
beracha.
another story.
When you're making the beracha, and you don't want to see the letters also. So what you do is you take the cloth, right? Sephardim, we have a cloth. No.
Shouldn't close it?
No.
Then you can't grab the cloth. If you
The
close
cloth is on the inside. You close the case, you're not grabbing nothing. You leave the case open. Usually there's something that's attached, like a scarf. You take the scarf,
All right,
you
cover it up
basically
and that's it.
cover the letters, but you hold the scarf, both hands,
Hold the scarf.
on the
You're not touching the cloth.
scarf in your hand, drape it across the Torah, grab onto it, tight. Etz chaim hi lemahazikim ba. Whoa.
So you're not really touching the Torah scroll while you're doing it.
You're touching it with your talet or with the cloth that's there. You are okay. Your hands are. You're not supposed to touch the parchment directly with your hand. So if you have gloves on, it's not a problem. So if you want to put gloves on, okay, that's okay. Put gloves on, and that's okay. That fulfills it. I don't think anybody's walking up with gloves. They're going to think you're Michael Jackson getting aliyah. So what happens in that situation? Sfaradim, we have the Ashkenazim. What do they have? A gartel. You take the gartel, yes, and you put it doesn't cover all the things, unfortunately, but you don't have to look at the letters, right? So you close the Sefer Torah. Ashkenaz is not a problem. You close the Sefer, right? And you take the gartel and you hold the gartel with you, and you hold both cloth on both sides. The belt
the gabbais.
that they
Like,
do
you gotta
to.
grab it from him.
No, you don't have to. He's not have a holder. You take it back. It's your aliyah. Excuse me. Let me have that.
Okay, so your new stuff.
You can use a talet also, but if it's a minhan Shabbat, we're not using talet usually, right? So it's only when we read Sefer Torah when you're wearing talet. When you're wearing talet, it's easy. When you're not wearing talet, what do you do?
One hand because it's very hard to do both.
I will have to look afterwards. We'll try to take out Sefer Torah, see how hard it is.
We were saying earlier about Sephardi and an Ashkenazi Torah not laning Sephardi from a Sephardi. Can you
What?
lane Yerushalmi from an Ashkenazi
Yes,
Torah?
absolutely.
Are you-
When they ask me about Korah every now and then in Ashkenaz, I don't lane Ashkenaz, I lane Yerushalmi. And when an Ashkenazi gets aliyah in a Sephardic Bet Knesset, I'll give you guys a tip. Okay, generally, after COVID, it got a lot better because people were allowed to read their own aliyot, even in Ashkenaz shuls. The first time in my life. Usually they have a Baal Koreh, right? You know, it's unfortunate when the Chazan or someone who knows how to read Sefer Torah has to have the Baal Koreh read them and Ahat Lamala Vesheva Lamata. It's very difficult. You made a mistake here, you made a mistake here. You don't even have the book, you know he's making mistakes. Okay? But even if he's reading perfectly, it's my aliyah, it's not his. So before COVID, there was no such thing as a person getting aliyah to Sefer Torah Ashkenaz and reading their own aliyah. Once COVID hit, it was amazing because what happened? The Baal Koreh said, you want to read, you go right ahead. I don't want to be anywhere near you. Thank you so much, I will. And I started reading my own aliyah. And, I continued the process. Baruch Hashem, it's gone over well for the most part, okay? But here's the secret. If you're an Ashkenazi and you get an aliyah in a Sephardic Bet Knesset, and you know how to read it, please read it. It's your aliyah. The Baal Koreh is only there for a person that doesn't know how to read. That's how we look at it. That's how we look at it. The Temanim, by the way, the Yemenites, if you don't know how to read the aliyah, you don't get the aliyah. And that's, you think 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, do you think there was a Baal Koreh? No. Of course. And they probably knew how to read the Sefer Torah by the time they were 10 years old. Even earlier, because it said Ben Hamesh Lemikra, Ben Eser Lemishnah, which means by the time the boy was 10 years old, he didn't just know how to read Sefer Torah. He knew how to read Esther, Megillat Esther. He knows how to read Yehoshua. He knows how to read all the Haftarot. He knows how to read all the Ketubim. That was the 5 years of education. And then when he's 10 years old, then he starts studying Mishnah. That's what it says in Pirkei Avot. Is that a suggestion? That's a great question. The Maharal asks, he says that's the reason why, God forbid, the Torah is being forgotten amongst the Jewish people, because they're not following the Mishnah. So think about it. Again, what's the issue with learning how to read Sefer Torah? Is it easy? No. Okay. It's a question of priorities. Is it more important to finish Shas or more important to be able to read Aliyah when you get Aliyah to Sefer Torah? That's a philosophical difference. A spiritual difference. I think to myself, a person who wants to be Talmid Chacham and knows how to know Shas can't read his own Aliyah? What's the Ikar? What's the Tafel? They're both needed. But Torah Shebichtav is the Ikar. Everything else is the Tafel. We need the Gemara and the Chachamim to help to understand what the Torah means. But Minahan Emile, what does that mean? When the Gemara says, you just taught this, Minahan Emile, what's the Gemara asking? Or Maikra, what is it asking? What's the source? And that source could be in the Torah, could be in the Navim, could be Ketubim. Maybe it's an Asmachta, maybe it's not. We can have a whole discussion about that. Who cares? Because the entire Gemara is based on the fact that there's Torah. How can it be a person doesn't know how to read? Now, if a person wasn't born with Hebrew and studying Art Scroll with Hebrew or the English or Russian or Spanish, to learn a whole new language is very difficult. Again, it's a question of priorities in that situation also, not giving those people any discounts, okay? But a person who knows how to read Hebrew, a person who can stand in front of a congregation and give a Devar Torah. Here's another tip. When you're giving Devar Torah, look up the Pesukim. Read them properly. Do you know how embarrassing it is for Baal Koreh when they hear someone giving a Devar Torah and reading the pasuk wrong? It's like, okay, what is this? This is Shelevele. What is this? The value of what you're saying is lost because you're reading the pasuk. Ashkenaz can read it according to Ashkenaz. I don't care. But again, they have to read it the way it's written. People embarrass themselves like that because they don't think it's a priority. Look at this Baruch Hashem, this Bet Knesset. How many people here know how to read Sefer Torah? You have maybe, 40 members here, 50 members? How many members we got here that come on a regular basis? 40, 50? This is about 12 people, 15 people that know how to read Sefer Torah. And not just in their bar mitzvah aliyah. Okay? There's 12 or 15 people. Yes?
But there's one knowing the skill.
Go someplace else. There's 300 people there. How many people know how to read Sefer Torah? 5. Statistically, that's a problem. Why? Because it's not a priority. The Ramchal talks about this a lot. He says that, Shnai Mikra v'echad Tagum, let's give it a simple, it's not optional, that's required. If it's tossed between learning Daf Yomi, the person only has time for Daf Yomi, and Shnai Mikra v'echad Tagum, what should he be learning? Shnai Mikra v'echad Tagum. That's halacha. And why is it, if a person really does Shnai Mikra v'echad Targum, and when you read Shnai Mikra, by the way, read it with the ta'amim.
You're saying lane it.
Lane it. Okay, lane it. What does lane means? Learn it. Means study it, right? When you read a pasuk, you read it with the ta'amim. Aramaic has no ta'amim, so that you read with any tune you want, okay? But the pesukim, when you do that, you know what happens? How many years is it going to take you before you can get up aliyah and read your own sefer, your own aliyah? You prepare a couple of minutes ahead of time. Chazan comes to you during the Chazarat Hashatz. By the way, that is the worst time to be giving out aliyot. I don't know where this custom comes from, that the Gabbai picks to give out the aliyot in the middle of Chazarah. What is this? So now they give him aliyah, and there's a conversation going on. Mutar? Permit?
Well, you can just give out the cards. Talking is
Yeah. No, I have a better idea. When I was Gabbai in a shul many years ago, okay? The aliyot were given out during Shirat Hayam. If the person is not there, you snooze, you lose. I'll give you a hosafa. But the aliyot, she is given out during Shirat Hayam. Why am I giving it to someone who just showed up in the middle of Kiryat Shema? Yeah, that's okay. We have to understand there's a right way and there's this way, okay? Okay, so the aliyot should be given out during Shirat Hayam or during the Halaluyot.
They give some time to prepare.
First of all, it gives the person who's going to read more time to prepare, right? But then there's no disruption. If a person has to talk, listen, I need aliyah shivi. I have a yard site today, okay? They can have, it's regarding the tefillah, that one might be able to talk about it in the middle of Pesukei Zimra. I don't know. But certainly during the Hazat HaShatz, that's not allowed. Here's another one. I'm going off today. I'm going to get myself in trouble. When should the Gabaim be collecting the tzedakah? During the Chazarah?
Yeah, they do.
No. These things allow people to think that the Chazarah is unimportant.
It's actually more important.
It's very important. It's more important. The person speaks in the Chazarah, the Shulchan Aruch says, Gavdol avono mineso. He doesn't say that if the person speaks in the middle of the Yishtabach. That's a separate issue. Then he goes back for the war. He can't fight because that's avonot shebeyado. So he collects tzedakah in the middle of the, I have a 10. Can you give me change? In the middle of Hazarah? Anyway, off topic today. Sorry about that. Listen, little by little, we'll fix things little by little, but that should not be done then. Sfaradim give this before the Shirat Hayam. That's when they go up and give their own. They give their own. Okay. All right, let's continue on. So he said, "Umidah zo hanikret sechel tov," and this midah that's called sechel tov, right? Omedet im ha'adam biyoto mekayem haTorah v'mitzvot. This sechel tov stands with the person, is with the person when he's involved in umekayem Torah umitzvot. Yes? So how does a person have sechel tov? Torah, mitzvot. Proper good wisdom, sechel and tov, which is also related to the tzaddik, which is the yesod. How does a person have shefa and bracha? Torah umitzvot. Very straightforward. We're going to read this week's parasha. something is called vavim la'amudim. What is vavim la'amudim? Hooks. So the word vav, what does the word vav mean?
It's also a
Hook, connection, hook, all same idea, right? So a vav, and what is the Torah? It's like the Torah shebichtav is the tiferet, which is the essential part of the vav, the ze'er anpin. Yes? Okay? So once again, shebe'al peh, Torah shebichtav. Now that doesn't mean a person doesn't study Chas v'Shalom Torah shebe'al peh. You can't understand the Torah shebichtav without the Torah shebe'al peh. But that means that you don't have to study Torah shebichtav at all. Zero. When you study Zohar, there's no way you're not studying Torah shebichtav because it's pasuk. When you study Gemara, it's pasuk. Even if you want to go according to the opinion of the Ramah, that says the Gemara is like a cholent, that a person will fulfill the mitzvah of studying the Torah by studying the Gemara only. Okay, 1 second. But that's making an assumption. What's that assumption? You get to a pasuk you're not familiar with, what do? You stop, you go open up a Tanakh, and you learn that pasuk and maybe a couple before and a couple afterwards. Right? That's making that assumption. Otherwise, how is there Torah shebichtav? You're studying Talmud. And if every time you get to a pasuk that you don't understand, you say weiter, how are you fulfilling the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, which includes Torah shebichtav, Torah shebe'al peh? How are you fulfilling the mitzvah of studying the Sod? The beginning of Sefer Parashat Mishpatim, if you open up the Zohar, there's the first half of Mishpatim is discussing what?
of the Torah of the Zohar
Of the Zohar for Parashat Mishpatim. What is the first 20, 30 pages of that? Gilgul Neshamot. It's called Sabah de Mishpatim. Why is it called Sabah de Mishpatim? Because a person who passed away, we know his name, called Sabah. That's what a Sabah came to teach Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai the concept of Gilgul Neshamot. Now, there's two ways a person can come into Gilgul. No, it's not Eliyahu. Sometimes when it says Sabah in the Gemara, that could be Eliyahu and Avi, right? But here it's not. They say it's not. It's a different person who passed away. Why does a person come back in a Gilgul?
To finish something?
There's two reasons.
Punishment.
Reason number one is a punishment. It's a punishment. You did something really, really bad. Person did something bad in their life the first time. They kind of come back to fix it.
He's still in his process.
Okay, the process
Completed.
I don't know what you're referring to the process.
He has to reach some point before.
How is it? Look at the Rambam, the laws of Teshuvah. Yes, what does the Rambam say? Says there's a concept of Teshuvah, and there's a concept of Teshuvah Gemura. Gemura, complete Teshuvah. What is complete Teshuvah? The Rambam brings an example. A person had relations with some woman that he wasn't allowed to have relationship with. Arayot, right? And he wants to make Teshuvah Gemura. How does that happen? He has to be in the same situation, the same place, with the same woman, probably at the same age, because if he's 20 years old when he sinned and he's 90 years old when he meets her again, how's it the same situation? So the Rambam doesn't say that, but it's hinting. How is it possible that, and here's the question, if the person sinned with this woman when he was 20 years old, and he comes to contact her again with his 25 years old, what should he do? Run away. Oh, let me see. Let me test myself to see if I can withstand, if my tshuva is good. Nicht good. En apotropos la'arayot. Don't do that. Run away. So how is it possible to have teshuvah gemura? The Rambam says that? That's not what the Rambam says.
You're coming back.
Okay, Rab Nachman, let's do the Rambam. So the Rambam I think he's hinting over there very clearly. I'd love to hear someone explain to me from the Peshat how the Rambam says you're supposed to put yourself in that situation again when Pirkei Avot says you shouldn't rely on yourself until the day you die. Okay? How is he in the same situation, the same woman, same place, same age? Only one way. Return trip.
I don't think it's the same woman. I think it's
He
similar.
says same woman. Open it up.
So
We'll
the
look
woman
inside.
also gets Gilgul. How is it the same woman?
Same. Look at, if you look in the language, I'm pretty sure. Look at the laws of Teshuvah. We can read it right now. Okay?
This is deja vu.
It's not a deja vu. The only way a Yerei Shamayim who did Teshuvah for this terrible, terrible sin, if he sees the woman again, he's going to say, "Oh, let me see how it works this time." That's very nice. I hear what you're saying. Maybe yes, maybe no. Let me ask a question. Rashi. Did Rashi know the Sod? If you read his commentary, he doesn't ever say v'zeh sod. Doesn't say that. It's not the Ramban who says zeh sod, the Rabbeinu Bachya says zeh sod. So you mean to tell me that the Ramban and Rabbeinu Bachya knew the Sod, Rashi didn't? Of course Rashi knows the Sod. But what is his purpose of writing the Perush is what? Midrash. Pshat Midrash. So what does he do? For someone who knows the Sod, can look at, see what Rashi is writing and say, Vayetze Yaakov mi Be'eshava vayelech Harana. What does Rashi say over there? Roshem. What word Roshem? What is that? A tzaddik leaves a city, it makes Roshem. What's the tzimtzum? The or is retracted, or whatever you want to say it is. What's left inside the halal? What's it called? Rishimu. Oh, so you mean to tell me that Rashi didn't know the Sod? He just got lucky on that one. Nonsense. The Rambam didn't know the Sod? I don't agree. I think he knew it, okay? But he did his purpose of writing the Yad is not to tell you Sod. Purpose of writing the Yad is halacha. And in the Moreh, even if you want to say, well, the Moreh is a problem because there's a lot of things in there that if you know, what the Rambam was doing at the Moreh, remember, he was living in a time where there's this concept of rational thought, right? That's not Kabbalah. Kabbalah is min hashemayim. Rational thought is olam hazeh. So therefore, the Rambam in his introduction, which people don't read, to the Moreh, what does he say? He says, everything I'm writing in this book is shikul dat. What is shikul dat? Based on my understanding, my logical understanding of things, not involving logical understanding. If you hear something from your teacher, that's a Kabbalah. Now, here it doesn't mean Kabbalah esoteric. Here it means a tradition. You receive something from your teacher that's different than what I'm saying. Ignore what I'm saying and listen to your teacher. Because if you have Sivara and you have Kabbalah, which one wins? 100% of the time, Kabbalah wins, not Kabbalah Sod. Kabbalah means, that's a very nice logical. You have a Kal Vachomer. That's great. Kal Vachomer is Shikul Dat. It is the weakest of the arguments. Because if someone has a Kal Vachomer, and then someone else comes, well, I heard from my rabbi, and this is what we received, the Kal Vachomer is knocked down. Now, most of the time, since the Torah was given to Bnei Adam, the halakha does make logical sense, but not always. Tanu Shachnai. Not always does it make logical sense. Okay, so how'd we get to that? So the Rambam, maybe you're right, maybe you're not. If you look in a book called the Abarbanel's explanation of Pirkei Avot. If I'm not mistaken, it's in the section of Pirkei Avot, B'makom she'ani shishtadel hayot ish. The Abarbanel was a rationalist. Abarbanel, he might have been a Kabbalah guy, I don't know, but everything he wrote is rational, very logical. Okay, no claims. 10 questions, 10 answers. Complicated, but that's the Abarbanel. Brilliant genius. What does the Abarbanel write? That he met an old man who knew another person, and it's a testimony. It's either we trust what our rabbis are writing or we don't. If he's writing in the book, it's a testimony. Yes? Otherwise, he ain't writing it. And he writes that the Rambam later on in his life, he went to Egypt. Who did he meet in Egypt? What?
Rambam went to Egypt.
And Egypt is not too far from the land of Israel, yes? And there were people who were studying the Sod in Egypt. Maybe it wasn't so available in Spain. I don't know, except that the Ramban was in Spain. So the Ramban maybe his teacher didn't know the Sod, so the Ramban was stuck. He didn't learn the Sod because his teacher didn't know it. The Rimigash was not a Kabbalist. I can't imagine the Rif was not a Kabbalist, but that's another discussion for another day. Okay? So who's the teacher of the Rimigash, who's the teacher of the Rambam, right? So a little strength for our Moroccan friends over there. Okay? But what happens? It says the Abarbanel, what does he say? He met this person, the Rambam, later on in his life, and he regretted many of the things he wrote in the Moreh. That's amazing. And it's a rationalist rabbi, Abarbanel, that's saying that. So maybe he wrote Moreh Nevuchim. What's the name of the book? Moreh Nevuchim, the guide for the people who are confused. People who are studying the Kabbalah don't need the Moreh. They're not confused. So therefore, the Moreh is not written for the Kabbalists. The Moreh is written for the people who don't know Kabbalah and how to answer questions that are complicated questions for people who just want to look at the Peshat or the Nigle. But does that mean that the Rambam didn't know the Sod? And why would he regret what he wrote? Because he wrote things that were wrong. You know, if something is logical and wrong, it's better not to write it. Make sense?
Be logical and wrong.
Para Aduma. Is there anything logical about the Para Aduma? No. So, but if you apply logic there, you're wrong. The whole concept of a chok is there is no logic, right? The Torah is min hashamayim, which means it's given to Bnei Adam. So there's a level of the Torah that is certainly logically understood, and every piece of the Torah, for the most part, has to have, because not everybody has the brain power to be able to involve themselves in complicated things, right? Or I should say differently, maybe they have the brain power, too much brain power is not good. Al tiyeh chacham harbeh, right? Sometimes people's own wisdom, their own chokhmah gets in their way because they think they have to understand everything, and they don't have the humility to understand that there are things they cannot understand, not because they can't understand. No human being can understand. Right? There's a misuse of wisdom. That's why in Hebrew, you can use the word chokhmah for wisdom, or you could use the word chokhmah for cunning. Okay? I'll show you inside. If I'm not mistaken, there's a pasuk that's... Anyway, let's go back to the book, okay? Any questions on what we talked? We're a little off the topic here. By Shechem, what does it say by Shechem? Yes? Before the Baal Korah leaves. What does it say by Shechem? Doesn't it say B'chokhmah over there? Bring me Chumash.
When he was reproving Levi and Shimon.
I don't think it's there, but let me just check it since you brought it up. Maybe it is, maybe it's not.
When he reproved Levi and Shimon, why did they
Okay, let's see. Okay. Use the word mirma. Use the word mirma. And look at the translation in Aramaic. Bechochmeta. So mirma, this is by Shechem. It says, "Vayanu bnei Yaakov et Shechem ve'et Hamor aviv b'mirma v'yidaberu." What is b'mirma? If you look at the Onkelos, he translates b'mirma b'chochmeta.
Mirma is sort of like cheating or swindling them, cunning.
It's cunning.
Cunning. Okay, so
In order to be cunning, you have to be smart.
outsmart them.
You outsmart someone, right?
That's a room, though.
Okay, let's see. Good. Let's look at the Nachash. Same thing. Let's look at the Nachash. Same trait. Let's see what the Nachash is over there. Hold on a second. Okay. V'Nachash haya arum mikol hayat hasadeh. Here's the Aramaic. V'chiviyah hava hakim.
That's it.
What is hakim?
Same short.
Same shorish. Again, the Aramaic is showing the word chokhmah has this. I think there's a place in the Tanakh as well. I'll have to look for it. Okay, I'll get a concordance afterwards. But we see there's a relationship between the word chokhmah and there's wisdom, and then there's cunning. Anyway, okay. Hakim means cunning in Aramaic.
Isn't that the last name of the Democratic minority?
Yeah. Good luck for him.
Right?
It says in the Gemara, I think this past week, that some Rebbeim would use the snakes to dig for gems.
Okay.
So that's a good way of using it.
So what chokhmah does use chokhmah?
No, I'm saying, just kind of working off what you're saying, that it would make these snakes dig for gems or
Okay.
diamonds and gold.
In Arabic, what's hakim? A doctor.
Tabib is a doctor.
Oh, hakim is also a doctor.
Okay.
Okay, why? What's a chacham? Hakim. In order to become a doctor, a person has to have a certain amount of chokhmah. Yes? Okay. All right, let's continue. Umidah zo nikret sechel tov omedet im ha'adam biyoto mekayem haTorah mitzvot. The siman. What's the siman? Reshit chokhmah yirat Adonai sechel tov lechol osehem. So Reshit chokhmah yirat Hashem. When it talks about chokhmah here, what is it talking about? The Torah. Before a person can learn Torah, a person has to have yirat Hashem. Reshit chokhmah. Before chokhmah has to come yirat Hashem. Once a person has yirat Hashem and then they have chokhmah, what happens? Sechel tov. Who gets sechel tov, which means the shefa? Lechol osehem. Gadol tamud hamevi lema'aseh. Great is Talmudic learning that brings a person to action. Unfortunately, again, a person, even though there are certain mitzvot that we can't do today, and I'm not saying a person should study Talmud on that, but if you have a choice to study Masechet Berachot or study Masechet, and you're not a shoch, Kilayim, well, there's no Gemara for that. I'm trying to think. Okay, but Chulin is God's halakha practical if you want to be a shochet, right? Or kashrut is a big piece of kashrut is Chulin. Avodah Zarah, there's a big piece of Avodah Zarah. But think about this. You have Masechet Avodah Zarah. A beautiful Masechet, by the way. Okay? A small section talks about Ta'aruvot. The rest is not much. The halakha l'maaseh is not so strong there. Right? But people spend a lot of time studying Gemarot that have no Yevamot. Again, there's things in Yevamot that are no heg for today, yes? And one can learn a lot about living life even from something that is not related. But when you want to learn, first of all, let's understand something. When a person is studying Talmud, what is the purpose of that study?
To learn how to learn.
Oh, really? To learn how to learn? That's the purpose of studying Talmud, to learn how to learn?
You're exercising your learning skills.
So like the South Koreans. The South Koreans study Talmud in their high school so they can sharpen their minds, so they can be smarter. That's what the purpose of Talmud is? I hope not. What is the purpose for studying Talmud?
You learn the difference of art. You learn how to...
That's really... Oh, this is sad.
Closer to God, it's the same thing.
Okay, again, that's the higher level. Good. But let's talk from a practical point of view.
Understand the Mishnayot.
And what's the purposes of learning the Mishnayot?
Understand the Torah?
What's that?
Derive out of halakha.
Understand Torah?
We're missing a big piece here, guys.
You're understanding
A very big piece.
how they derive halakha.
Gadol Talmud Hamevi Lema'aseh. When a person is studying a daf of Gemara, very important on the top, Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Or. Everybody know what I'm talking about? If you look at the Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Or, there's going to be a letter in the text of the Talmud, and that letter is going to point you to the Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Or, and it's going to tell you whether that, if there's a letter there, that means there's a halachic implication from that section of the Talmud. What's halachic? It's in the Torah, it's in the it's in the Shulchan Aruch, it's in the Rambam, Maimon, it's in the Smag. And you think one is supposed to, when they're studying Talmud, that they finish, just continue on, weiter? You just got the Gadol Talmud Hamevi Lema'aseh. You just got to a halacha. Maybe that halacha is not noheg today because it's Bet HaMikdash. Okay, you can go weiter. But if that halacha is noheg today, how are you not looking that up?
You're going to go to the Shulchan Aruch for that?
How are you not looking that up? In the Torah, in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Rambam, how are you not looking that up? If we truly hold Gadol Torah HaMevi Talmud HaMevi Lema'aseh, where's the Ma'aseh? What, Talmud is just an intellectual exercise? That's what the purpose of Talmud is? Absolutely not. The purpose of Talmud, the purpose of learning Torah is for action. And if there's a halacha there, a person has to stop, unless you know the halacha already. Baruch Hashem, you're genius. You know the halacha, that's great. But if you don't know the halacha, go to the Rambam, go to the Shulchan Aruch. That's why there's a Rav Kook, the Rav Kook Institute. There's a Gemara, it's called Halacha Birura. I'm not sure anybody ever heard of it. Yes? It's a Gemara, though. What they do, it's amazing. This is like a walking class, rabbinical halachic class. What they did initially is they realized that part of the problem is when they put the little letter on top, people are too lazy to go get the Rambam, too lazy to go get the Torah, too lazy to go to Shulchan Aruch. So what did they? Made it easy. They took the Vilna Shas, and whenever there was a Ner Mitzvah v'Torah Or, they brought the Rambam on the bottom. They brought the Shulchan Aruch on the bottom. So you don't have to go in. You have no excuse. It's right there. So stop, go down, and read the language of the Shulchan Aruch. Read the language of the Rambam. And then in the back, what they do is they take each one of these that there is halacha written about, that's from Maaseh, and they bring the Rishonim. It's like a whole class right there. So you could pick any sugya. You could pick the halacha there, and you go look it up. So I give a class once a year to ladies in Parashat Naso. Why is it for ladies? So, got to talk about covering the hair at least once a year. Kisui Rosh. Covering the hair. Married women. So once a year, and usually I have a ladies class I was doing in my shul I was in previously, and 2 or 3 weeks before Parashat Naso, which is right after Shavuot, I would tell the ladies, I just want to let you guys know that 2 or 3 weeks from now is Parashat Naso. I will be talking about hair covering. And some of the women cover the hair and some of the women don't. So I said, I will not be offended. I understand if you don't want to come to that class, it's okay. But at the end of the day, I have to give it because after 120 years, when I have to answer to God all the things I did in my life, I don't want him to ask Grossman. You had them for every year. You had them every. You didn't talk about covering the hair, and there were people there not covering the hair. You're not talking about sniut in front of Benot Yisrael. How are you doing that? I said I don't want to have to answer for that. So once a year, there's going to be a class in Parashat Naso, and I'm going to talk about Kisui Rosh for the ladies. If you don't want to come, I won't be offended. How great Benot Yisrael are! That was the biggest attendance I had. Women who covered their hair wanted to understand why they were doing it. Women who didn't cover the hair wanted to, a little challenge. Oh, it's not written clearly. Is it rabbinic? And blah, blah, blah. Dealt with all that. And where did I get my material from? Halakha Brura. Right there, all the Rishonim go through all the details. Amazing. It's like a portable, now you have your Shirim and YU and all that kind of stuff. You can get that, but this is, you have a book right there, and Shabbat, you're good to go. Because it's Parashat Sotah. It talks about Kisui Rosh, right? That's the one that you have to, at least once a year, you have to mention it. But it's not, Rav Kook, I think, was the one who initiated the idea. He passed away. I think it was taken over by the Mossad Rav Kook. If you go halakhabrura.com, halakhabrura.com, I think there's no B-E, B-R-U-R-A-H. You go there, you'll see the sections. You can get them. I haven't seen them in Florida, but if you go to his bookstores in New York, they're there. Or you can order them from Israel. You have to pay a ton to get it shipped over here. I have most of them. I don't have all of them. I think there's some that still haven't been printed yet. There's a CD I'm waiting. I would love one day to get that has all of them. Yeah. They want to do the whole Shas. Yes, I think they have 26 of 30 something, 33. 26 of 33, I think, are done already. So most of the Shas is done.
What's that? Gives all the concepts of Talmud base.
Encyclopedia Talmudit? Okay, but that's different. That's not learning on the inside. That's learning on the outside, right? But this is a person who's studying a daf of Talmud, right? And what happens? You go, you look at the halakha, you look at the shakla. What I did about 2 years of class on Masechah Brachot. I only got to about daf Yud Zayin, if I'm not mistaken. And not all the videos are on the internet. Not all the videos are on, but I have a number of them. And what I did in that class is there was no, it's not a daf yomi. There was no expectation we're going to finish this at any time, just like with this book. We went through the ones that were halakha l'maaseh. We discussed in the back the shakla and tarya. I also discussed the agadah, how it's connected to the sugya. Why is the agadah there? It's not just a fluff. There's a reason why it's there, to the best of whatever. Looking at sources like the Ben Ish Chai, the Maharal. That's studying Talmud. Now, do you cover a whole masechet in 2 months? No. But the goal is mevi lema. Why did I start with Masechet Brachot? Why Brachot? Of all the Masechtot, it's arguably one of the easiest. Yeah. If all you care about is the halacha, it's relatively easy because these are things you're doing all the time. But Brachot contains all of the Yirat Shamayim that a person needs. Right? Seder Zira'im is what? Is Yirat Shamayim. All of Seder Zira'im is Yirat Shamayim. So therefore, since we only have one Bavli Talmud in Masechet Zira'im, Brachot, person wants to ask, how do I learn Yirat Shamayim? What Masechet is that in? First of all, it's everywhere. But if you want concentrated, Masechet Brachot. It's not child's play. Anyway, yeshivas have different priorities. They want to study ketubot, which is important, contracts, and talks about, kiddushin, kibud avayim, small, but these are things that don't have necessarily halakha ma'aseh for regular people. Some of them have, right? There is halakha, but do they focus on that? Are they studying the halachot in there? That's what's important, not just to get through the Talmud, but to also understand what the halachot are. That's Gadol Talmud and Mevi L'Maseh. So he says over here, again, Pasuk, Reshit Chochma Yirat Adonai Sechel Tov Lechol Osehem. Which means if a person wants to have Sechel Tov, what does it require? To action, do. Not just to study. Study has to bring a person to action. And if what a person is studying can't bring them to action, study something else. When you finish studying all of the things that involve action, then you can study things that have no action. So if you want to study Rambam, perfect thing. Let's say some people don't particularly like Gemara for whatever reason. They like Rambam. Nothing wrong with that. Rambam, especially now they have a version of the Rambam that brings on the bottom the Shulchan Aruch and Halacha L'Maaseh. It's heavy. I mean, they did the same thing with the Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan was basically the posek for the Ashkenazim before the Mishnah Berurah. Yes? And then what they do is they bring the Aruch HaShulchan with Piskei Mishnah Berurah on the bottom. Because the Ashkenazim don't always follow the Aruch HaShulchan. They don't always follow the Mishnah Berurah either, but that's another discussion for another day, right? But you bring on the bottom. So here's the same idea. You have the Rambam. Organizationally, there is nothing better, my humble opinion. There is no organization of Kol HaTorah Kula vis-a-vis halacha like the Rambam. Nothing. It's organized. There's very little, it's just perfect. As perfect as a human being can make this. So study the Rambam. You study the laws of Bet HaMikdash. I know the Lubavitch like to study it because they think themselves the Bet HaMikdash can be rebuilt. And yes, it's great they're studying it. But you study the laws of Bet HaMikdash, but first you study the laws of Tefillah, study the laws of the Shabbat. You have to study the parts that have Nogel Azman Hazeh. And then you can worry about the stuff that's Nogel Azman. Aruch HaShulchan, by the way, many people don't know, has two books. The person who wrote the Aruch is one, Aruch HaShulchan, number one. And then he has Aruch HaShulchan He'atid. And what does he do in that book? He brings all the halachot that the Rambam brought that are going to be for the future. And the great thing about there is he brings the Rishonim. Bet HaMikdash is built tomorrow. When we're going to have a question about halacha, let's assume the Mashiach is, what book is the Mashiach going to look at?
The Mishnah Torah Rambam. But now you're saying Aruch HaShulchan?
That wasn't written by the Rambam?
No. Aruch HaShulchan was written by Rav Baruch, Epstein. What's his first name? Yechiel Michal Epstein. One of my favorite books to learn from. Aruch HaShulchan Haitid. And if you look at the introduction, if a person studies the Aruch HaShulchan, you'll see something right away. His way of learning is a little different. It's not your typical, like Mishnah Berurah. What he takes the Shulchan Aruch, and then he brings Penyon on the bottom, right? Aruch HaShulchan is not doing that. He's not quoting Shulchan Aruch. He's bringing 1, 2, 3, just like the Rambam. 1, 2, 3, just like the Smag. 1, 2, 3. Why is that? Why is Aruch HaShulchan more modeling himself after the Sfaradim rather than the Ashkenazim? Rav Gansfried in the Shulchan Aruch, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, is the first one who actually put halachot, and when you study Rav Gansfried's book in yeshiva, I remember they look at you funny.
The Kitzur?
Yes, Gansfried. Gansfried. Shulchan Aruch, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. They look at you funny. Why are you studying halacha? Why are you not studying Talmud? What am I missing here? If you have a person who's a Baal Tshuva, you start with Talmud first? No. You start with halakha first.
You gotta know what to do in the morning.
You have to know what to do. So Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, again, they also have the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch on the bottom with the Piskei Mishnah Berurah. So a person can learn the halakha and then see what the halakha is today. This is a very Sephardic way, if I can humbly say so. The Aruch HaShulchan, in the introduction, he traces his descendants to Sfarad, Gerush Sfarad. In the introduction to the Aruch HaShulchan. Doesn't say. Spain. What does that mean? That his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Sfaradi. It's amazing that this derech of limud is more like the Sfaradim. No. They're not all from Spain. There are many Ashkenazim that went to Germany. They were there from the time that the reef was in Fez in Morocco. No.
Historically, it's a mystery.
Yeah.
The ancestors were from the Gerush.
Okay, very good. Yes, what are you saying?
I mean, I know from my Jewish history teaching that although many of them came from Germany, whatever, it's a mystery in terms of, some of the original Ashkenaz. They're not sure really.
One of the first is Maharam Rothenberg. That's, I think, 1100, 1000. Maharam Rothenberg. He was in Germany. Anyway, again,
They all came from Alexandria.
I don't know about that. Where you see that? That came from Bavel. When Bavel fell apart, right, with the barbarian, right, Bavel fell apart. They went to Sfarad, and I think also they went probably to Ashkenaz. They went to Europe. Anyway, so and then look at his son. It's amazing that there's a derech of limud that's transmitted, and I'm not sure how it was transmitted. What did his son Baruch Halevi Epstein write? Another one of my favorite Sfarim. Wow. You want to learn how to learn? This is how you learn how to learn. When a person's studying the Torah, you're taking Mikrat Gedolot. You have Rashi, you have Onkelos, you have Rabbeinu Bachye maybe, you have Ibn Ezra, you have, right? Don't we want to know what the Gemara says about the Pesukim? Rashi's not bringing the Gemara. Rashi is bringing the Midrash. He's bringing the Mechilta. He's bringing Midrash. Okay? And often it's very pleasurable when you look at Rashi, what he says in the Pasuk, and then you find what Rashi says in that Pasuk in the Gemara. Often they are different.
What is different?
Rashi's commentary on the Torah, on the Pasuk in the Torah, may be different than his commentary on that Pasuk when it's brought in the Talmud. How are you going to see that? Torah Temimah, book written by the son of Rabbi Yechiel Michil Epstein, Hashem Yikom Damav, which he died and he was killed in the Holocaust, is Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein. And he wrote Torah Temimah, a phenomenal book. It takes the parasha and it brings what the Gemara, when the Gemara quotes this pasuk, or when it's something, and usually related to something related to halakha or something in the maaseh. Amazing book. And then on the bottom, he has a commentary. And he will explain, Rashi says this over here, but on this pasuk in Masechet Sanhedrin, he says this. And he tries to reconcile it. Amazing.
Torah Temimah?
Torah Temimah. As a matter of fact, if you ever notice, when I give my class on Shabbat, what book do I have in front of me almost all the time? Torah Temimah. Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan, Aruch HaShulchan. That was written by his father.
One specifically for now, which is
one is Aruch HaShulchan, Halacha L'Maaseh for today, like Shulchan Aruch, like the 4 sections, and then the other one he brings he quotes extensively from the Rambam, because where else are you going to find clearly? So his organization is that of the Rambam. The organization of the Aruch HaShulchan is similar to the Shulchan Aruch, right? But the organization of Shulchan Aruch HaAtid is more like the Rambam, right?
So that Atid is more like the Rambam.
It's correct, because there's no Shulchan Aruch to model from. More like the Shulchan Aruch. So you could look at the Siman of Shulchan Aruch, and you see the Siman in Aruch HaShulchan. And if you want to study halacha, thing to look, Aruch HaShulchan. He brings the Bet Yosef, he brings the Bach, he brings the Tur, he brings all of the, and he gives you the entire sugya. It's a lamdish type of book. Let's put it that way. Person has to be loving of learning and to be able to appreciate that.
What came first, the Ramah or the Aruch HaShulchan?
The Ramah is first. The Ramah is the time of the Ramah is a contemporary of the Shulchan Aruch.
So why do you need the Shulchan? Why do you need the Aruch HaShulchan for the Ashkenazim if they can just go back?
Because 300 years goes by. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of new understandings. First of all, even the Ramah, the Shulchan Aruch, right? You have the Noseh Kelim, Shach, Taz, Magen Avraham, depending on where you are. What they're, again, halakha is complicated. Plus, there's machloket. There's all kinds of discussions, right? There's times we go like, again, Sfaradim is much easier halachically to study. We go like the Shulchan Aruch. That's it. What the Shulchan Aruch says, with very rare exceptions, that's the halakha, except for what we discussed this morning, right? When there's a toss-up between Shulchan Aruch and the Sod, sometimes the Sfaradim will go according to the Sod and not like the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, But Ashkenazim is more complicated. They don't. The Shulchan Aruch, you have the Ramah, but they don't always follow the Ramah. It's not like it says Ubnei Yotzim, Ubnei Yisrael Yotzim b'Yad Ramah. Spelt differently. Ramah in Hebrew is Mem Hey. He has Resh Mem Aleph, which means that the Ramah brought the Shulchan Aruch for Ashkenazim. He was going to write his own book. Shulchan Aruch came out with his book, and he said, "You know what? I'm not going to have a new book because the goal of Shulchan Aruch was to have one book for everybody." Didn't work out so well because he picked 2 out of 3 Sfaradim, Rambam, Rif, and then the Rosh. And the Rosh learns to among Sfaradim anyway. So the Ramah was writing his own book. So instead, in his humility, by the way, the Ramah is a huge Kabbalist. The Ramah was not just a halachic guy.
Where did you write that Kabbalah?
Yes. Anyway, let's go back to any other questions. So listen, the Nigla is also important. We have to study Nigla, but there's plenty of opportunities in the neighborhood here to study Nigla. There aren't enough opportunities to study the Nistar here.
What was the goal of Aruch HaShulchan? His goal was to make the Ashkenazi halacha.
No, the Shulchan Aruch.
The Aruch HaShulchan. Their goal was to make the Ramah Ashkenazi halachic learning easier for them.
No, his purpose was to write a book that has all of the sugyot lined up, so a person could be posek halacha. You cannot be posek halacha just from the Ramah alone, because you have to understand what the Nosei Kelim say. You have to understand what the other sources, which means if you look at they open up a Shulchan Aruch over there, Shulchan Aruch is like 2 lines, the Ramah is like 5 lines, and then everybody else is 100 lines. You have to be able to go through the entire sugya to see what's going on.
Everybody else, you mean the tour and the Bach.
If a person wants to study halacha, okay, there's 2 ways to. Maybe we should talk about this. Important. There's 2 ways to study halacha. I call it, one way is anterograde, one way is retrograde. Okay, I'm starting with halacha. That's retrograde. I want to trace to see where it comes from. What's written in the Torah about it? Is it Torah halacha? Is it rabbinic? What are the sugya? What does the Mishnah say? What does the Gemara say? What does Rashi, the Tosafot? What do the Rishonim say? Now come to the Shulchan, the Tur. What is the Bet Yosef? What is the Bach? What is the Tur? Then come to the Shulchan Aruch, Ramah, Nosei Kelim, and then you come to Mishnah Berurah or Chachma Vadya, and that's how a person can. So you start from the Torah, you work your way forward, or that's anterograde, or you start from the halacha and you go back. But the goal is to understand it beginning to end, which in some areas is very hard because there's a lot of different shakla and tarya, shall we say. Questions and answers. Aruch HaShulchan is basically telling you, here's the halachot. This is everything you need to know for this halacha. He goes to he brings the Torah, like the Rambam. Rambam starts a halacha. What's the first thing he says? If it's a Torah halacha, where is it written in the Torah?
Here's the halacha, here's the pasuk.
He says, this is the pasuk. Pick up any Rambam, you'll see. If it's a Torah concept, he's going to bring it. So when a person wants to start the laws of tefillah, Rambam starts off and says, where do we learn this from? The worship of the heart is only with prayer. That's what it means. Then you go to prayer. A person, that's what Talmud Torah is. It's understanding the source, the development, the different opinions, and what the halacha is today. But that requires a lot of time. What happens if a person just wants to learn halacha? You pick up Rav Gansfried's book.
Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Very abridged.
Why did Yalkut Yosef become such a popular book, even though it's not written by Chacham Avadia? It's written by his son. Why is that so popular?
It's got pictures in it.
It's halacha.
And it's easy to read.
So you have the top part, you know what to read, and then you got the bottom if you want extra credit. And if you look at the original ones, there was a lot less extra credit on the bottom. It was much shorter. As time went on, people demanded more, so there was more on the bottom. That's why he republished it. Okay?
He's using modern language.
Not modern language. He's bringing the sources. So remember, he has Yabia Omer.
He's talking about microwaves and different appliances.
Okay, but microwaves have been around for 30 years, 40 years. Microwaves have been around since I'm a kid.
Since 72.
Right, so microwaves is not new.
New foods, new issues. Is cooking? Is it mixing? Is it nolad? Is it? But these new foods, these new.
He discussed that in the original. So then you have what happens. You have Yabia Omer, which is his major halachic work, Shelot and Shuvot. Right? People ask questions. He gives answers in Yabia Omer. Finally, have an index for Yabia Omer, which was missing forever. Now they have it. So if a person wants to learn a halacha beginning to end, there's no better place to look than the Yabia Omer. Even the Ashkenazim look at Yabia Omer. You know, where Rav Moshe Feinstein is very short. A person asks him a question, he gives an answer. Tremendous, but very quick, gives the answer, right? You look at Yabia Omer, pages and pages and pages. He brings all the opinions. A person can have a whole situation. But that doesn't help. If a person wants to learn the halacha, if you study Yabia Omer, it's going to take you years to get through the halachot. Person wants to learn halachot, you go to Yalkut Yosef, or you go to another book by his son called Halacha Brura, which...
Halacha Brura is now two different things. There's a new one based off the Yalkut Yosef, but then you said Halacha Brura.
Halacha Brura is not based off Yalkut Yosef. Halacha Brura is based off his father's Chuvot, not based on Yalkut Yosef. And if you want to see what Chacham Avadia says, he has a book called Chazon Avadia. And there he has all the holidays, tefillot, and things like that. What source did I use to bring Rav Avadia Yosef's opinion that Gaza is not part of Eretz Yisrael?
Gaza is not part of the Christian.
Is it historic? You brought proof that it's not part of the
Chacham Avadia did. Oh, a little shocker on that one. It's good. I didn't record this because they did it on Shabbat, so it might be worthwhile to have a brief discussion about it. Okay, so let's. It's called Derech Eretz Plishtim. It's not called Derech Eretz Canaan. Who said it's Canaan? Now, it may be part of the original land that was given to Avraham Avinu for the future, Greater Israel, yes. Okay, so if we're thinking about that, that means Turkey and Syria and a piece of Egypt, maybe all of Jordan for sure, some of Iraq, right? Some of Saudi Arabia. All that is in what we call Greater Israel, right? But what has the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael? For instance, if Abraham was promised that he can have up to the Euphrates River, right? What if I grow produce in Iraq, right next to the Euphrates River now? Trumot Masrot? Trumot Masrot? No. So what makes what Abraham was told have the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael?
You have to have a king. It has to be official. It has to Mashiach. They have to need it to conquer from Lechemet Reshut.
You're speaking incorrectly, okay? First thing is you have to have a king, okay, or a leader. Okay, there's no Urim v'Tumim for Milchemet Mitzvah. You don't need the Urim v'Tumim to tell you to go conquer land that God already told you. The Urim v'Tumim is only for land that is Reshut, which is not yet. Yeah, and again, it's in stages. The first piece is everything in the land of Israel, including the Galil and the Golan. That is all part of Israel. So that was conquered by David HaMelech. In addition, David HaMelech also conquered up to Syria, up to Damascus. Not in Damascus, but right below Damascus. That David HaMelech conquered. But that is not part of the land of Israel. Doesn't have the Kedusha of the land of Israel. Why not? Because David HaMelech, when he conquered it, he didn't finish conquering the stuff he was supposed to conquer in the land of Israel first. So therefore, it had Kedusha in the first Bet HaMikdash. But when the first Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, the Kedusha of all of that conquest is gone.
You start back at zero.
That starts back to zero. When Ezra came in, everything that they took over, they were Mekadesh l'sha'ata u'la'atid lavo. So therefore, everything Ezra conquered, that was the part of the land of Israel in the second Commonwealth, that has the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, from a point of view of Trumot and Ma'asrot. Gaza, or whatever that area is, was conquered by David HaMelech. Okay? But not conquered by Ezra. So therefore, it doesn't have the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael.
And Ashkelon is iffy.
Ashkelon is iffy. We don't 100% know. It doesn't have the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's two different aspects. One is Trumot and Masrot. One is Yom Tov Shini Shel Galuyot. A Jew living in Gaza, assuming they can survive over there, can have one Yom Tov. Because that goes by minhag. But to say Trumot and Masrot, that's from the Torah. So Chacham Avadia writes very clearly in Chazon Avadia, in the laws of Trumot and Masrot, that Gaza is Chutza la'aretz vis-a-vis Trumot and Masrot.
It's interesting because the Hasmoneans before Gaza, and many battles over there. I don't know if they took
They didn't-
total control.
they didn't conquer it. No.
That was pre-Ezra.
The Hasmoneans is after
Oh,
Ezra.
Way, Fred. Come on.
Hashmonaim is 150 years before the destruction of the temple, second
About
temple.
the site.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, we have to look at what the halakha says. I'm not saying we shouldn't take it or whatever, I'm not getting into the politics over here. But what is the halakha? Is this part of the land of Israel? Doesn't have the Kiddusha of Eretz Yisrael or not?
Well, where's the border?
Now, why did the rabbis institute that Syria, you have Trumot and Ma'asorot midrabanan? It's drabanan. Is it safek? It's drabanan. It's not safek deoraita. Because if it's safek deoraita lechumra, it's midrabanan, if I'm not mistaken. Why? Because David HaMelech did conquer that area. So therefore, it had the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael at one point. So therefore, it's, from rabbinically, it was sort of, we take Trumot and Masot from Syria. And the Gemara also says, not only we take Trumot and Masot for Syria, we take it from Iraq, we take it from other places, because all those places had Jews living there, okay? And those are part of greater Israel, shall we say. So you might want to say Gaza, you're from Midrabanan. But again, that's not part of the decree from the time of the Mishnah. We can't add it now.
The land needs to be owned by a Jew.
What land?
The land in Iraq. You buy some dates from Iraq. You got to meiser them?
If I'm not mistaken, I have to look. I want to say because I hadn't looked at it recently, but there was a halakha whether you're not allowed to tell a goy on Shabbat to write a star to purchase land of Israel. The halakha is yes. I mean, rather goy in a situation of where you want to purchase land in the land of Israel on Shabbat, you're allowed to tell a goy to do that. Okay, but that's only in the land. I think outside the land of Israel, you're not allowed to tell a goy to do that. I don't want to say quote for specific because I didn't prepare it recently. Okay, but anyway, there's a lot of discussion here, but we should understand this halacha. We have to. What does the halacha say about Gaza? Ovadia says chutz la'aretz.
Eilat is chutz la'aretz.
Eilat would also be chutz la'aretz.
Beersheba?
No,
So
Beersheba
where
is
is
not.
that line? It's an invisible line somewhere.
Okay, if you open up Chazon Ovadia, he's got a picture over there. You
He's
can
got a
see it.
picture?
Yeah.
Okay. And you live in this city, you live in this settlement, you know
He's
where
got a picture right there. Yom Tov Shinu Shigaliot, no issue. That's custom minhag. One Yom Tov. One Yom Tov. Gaza, the Eilat's one Yom Tov. Okay? But a person is growing produce in Eilat, there's no Trumot and Masorah from the Torah. Okay. Hopefully in the future that'll change. All right, now so okay, Bli Neder, I will bring Chazon Ovadia next week because I don't think we have it here. And interestingly enough, he wrote this at the end of his life. The last year of his life, I think it was in 2013, that's when he wrote this book. That's when it was published, at least. And he died later that year. So this is his last, from what I can understand, last work. Chazon Ovadia and Trumot Masrot. Okay. We didn't even catch up to all the stuff we did last week. Sorry about that. But you were here last week, so you're good. You'll catch it. You catch it. No problem.
Okay.
So we see Reshit Chochma Yirat Adonai Sechel Tov Lechol Osehem. The goal is Asiyah. What world are we in? The world of Asiyah. This is not a world of potential. This is a world of action. Nobody gets paid for potential. You get paid for action. Just like a lot of federal employees are going to learn this week. If they don't have 5 things to write, they're out of a job. What a concept, accountability. This is a world of action. You have a job, there's performance expected. If there's no performance, you're fired. That's how it works. That's this world, right? That's this world. This is a world of action. This is not a world of potential. In Shemayim, that's a world of potential. Here, it's a world of action. Olam Asiyah. The Hasod HaGadol, I love when he says Hasod HaGadol because some juicy stuff is coming. Hasod HaGadol, the big sod, which means everything else is regular sod. This is big sod. Maskil al davar yimtza tov. Mishlei, chapter 16, verse number 20. Maskil al davar. What is davar? Yimtza tov. What does it mean, maskil al davar yimtza tov? Vaidaber Elohim et kol hadevarim ha'ele lemor Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hoseticha Me'eretz Misraim. What am I talking about? Aseret HaDibrot. They are called davar, dibrot, devarim. Maskil al davar yimsa tov. Let's see. Ulufi shaya David alav shalom davek b'midazo, because David HaMelech was attached to this midah. Haya omer le David maskil. Sometimes it's maskil le David maskil. The chol lashon maskil. Every time we see the word maskil, b'makom hazeh talui, it's hanging. I'm not sure what he means by that. We have to see on the bottom. Yes, still Shaare Orah. We didn't get to the explanation. V'hayodea sod hachen, and a person who knows the secret of the chen. What is the chen? What's that? Correct. Very good. The hidden wisdom, yes. Yeda will know. Sechel tov yiten hen. Another pasuk, Mishlei 13, verse number 15. Why so many pasukim in Mishlei? Because Mishlei also contains sod. First of all Tanakh contains sod. But Shlomo Melech was the Chacham Mikol ad mipnei kedem. Yes, from many mipnei kedem, and he wrote in Mishlei and in Shir Hashirim and in Kohelet. It's all sod, and that's the problem with Kohelet. Kohelet looks like there's all these contradictions. What's the difference between the Peshat and the sod regarding contradictions?
It's really not a contradiction.
In the Pshat, there are contradictions, right? You have to answer. When you have two different Uruminhu, there's two contradictory opinions. You have to explain how to understand it. Hekidami, what's the case? This case here is like this case is like that. That's called nigle, right? When you have two things that are, because in the logical world, two things cannot be both right and opposites. One is right, one is wrong.
Binary. Has to be binary. 1 or 0.
No, but either one is right and one is wrong.
But in the Olam HaSod,
And that's why in halacha, again, they may both be right. Elu ve'elu direi Elokim hayim, which some people understand. One is for in the time before the Mashiach, where we go according to Hillel. After the Mashiach, we go according to Shammai. So we understand that both Hillel and Shammai are correct. The only difference between the two of them is they're talking about two different time periods. Correct. But from the Sod perspective, since we're not talking about something that is physical, we're talking about something that's spiritual or based on imagery, there could be two opposites, and it's the same thing. Halacha goes according to the correct, 100%. So, a classic example, you have this book. If you're looking at this book, please tell me how it's about what? 6 inches on top and about 8 inches on the bottom, right? Okay. Now the same book I'm going to turn like this. Book is 1 inch on top and 8 inches on the bottom. What's the difference? Same book. That's correct. So something that is not physical, like a vision or prophecy, can have two opposites, but they're not opposites. It's different perspectives of the same thing. That's the difference between the nigle and the nistar. The goal of the nigle is to break things apart so you can understand different cases. The goal of the nistar is to recognize it's all the same. How do we put it together? Okay. Very nice. Chazak. V'da ki yesh hefresh ben maskil ben mevin. There's a difference between the word maskil and the word mevin. What's the difference? And what's maskil? Sechel is dot. Let's see what he says in the bottom. I don't want to prejudge it. Bina is bina, that's for sure. No question about that. Mevin davar mitoch davar. Dat is experiential knowledge. Chokhmah is knowledge that is given to you from Shamayim. That's ratzon. That we have no access to keter, understanding ratzon. We have no clue about ratzon. Chokhmah is a gift from Hashem. Bina is basically mevin davar mitoch davar. Da'at is basically experiential knowledge. Why does a person stand up for? The Torah is going to teach us mi penei seva takum v'hadata penei zaken, right? Zaken, according to, again, there's a discrepancy. What is seva? What is zaken? Okay, according to most opinions, zaken is chacham, zekana nun, right? So what is seva? Old. Machloket, is it 60? Is it 70? Let's leave that alone for now. Why do you have to stand up for someone who's 70 years old, Ama Aretz? When an old man walks in the shul, right? Stand up. You can be Am Aretz Gamur. You stand up. Halacha, by the way, is for a Gentile who's 70 years old, you have to stand up. What? Why? Dot. Experiential knowledge. What they do with that is the question. What they're supposed to do with that is connect to God. That's the mission of man. But when a person lives a certain amount of lifetime, what happens? They get knowledge. They get a knowledge of the world, a perspective that someone who's young, unless they're studying Torah, is not going to have. If no one ever experienced the crash, the housing crash in 2008, no one is seeing the warning signs of what's going on right now. But since history repeats itself, and the reason history repeats itself is because Yud Ke Vav Ke controls history, and he wants us to learn and to be better. So history repeats itself. But the longer a person is alive, the more they got to see. They saw 1990, whatever. They saw 2008, and now they see the warning signs from 2025. Anyway, crazy world's going on right now. That's all I got to say. You know, I saw something this week that the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin in Perichelek says that the Mashiach will come when there's no pruta in the kis. Right, tichle peruta mina kis. And we have a president that wants to get rid of the penny. Get rid of the penny. That's good. Interesting. That's all I'm going to say. Interesting. Wants to get rid of the penny. So that's a peruta. Israel got rid of the pruta a long time ago. Now it used to be called the lira and a pruta. Now it's agorot and things like that. Now they just round up. Exactly. Well, they had a big inflation problem in the 80s. That's why money. You go back to Israel 2 years later, the same money's worthless. Now, Baruch Hashem, it's much better. Their economy is much better. I mean, when I went to Yeshiva the first time, it was, wow. They just, they had big notes, whatever, they're worthless because they were lirot, and they were a shekel, and they changed to shekel chadash.
New Israeli shekel.
New Israeli shekel, because the old Israeli shekel was worthless. Anyway, but that was when they had inflation. Now, Baruch Hashem, it's much better. The shekel has been holding very nicely for the dollar for 20 years.
When you were there, it was like 3.1 or something?
It was 3.1 new shekel.
What year was this?
86. I don't know. The old shekels were worthless.
I remember kind of.
Old shekels were worthless. Anyway, continuing on. So we see here, Kisod mevin hu mehamshachat mekor habina. There's a lot here. We're going to have to see what he says in the bottom. Kisod mevin, the secret of mevin, he mehamshachat, from drawing mekor habina. Mekor means source. Bina is the bina. What's that? 100%. Correct. Binah is Lashon 100%. What is Mekor HaBinah? Let's see what that means on the bottom. Ve'amaskil hu mehamshachat hatov techila vasof. And the maskil is hamshachat hatov techila vasof. What is techila? What is sof?
Sof would be yes. Well, Malchut. And he's drawing the Tov from the Yisod. Sof. Yeah. Ratzon Hashem, Keter.
We said maskil is da'at, I think, correct? Okay. So when we're not choshesh for the keter, because we have no access to the keter anyway, it's will. Chochma bina da'at. We have the 10 sfirot, right? And da'at is instead of the keter, yes? So let's see if maskil is da'at, right? So the bina gives over to da'at. What is da'at? Da'at is gives to the top of the zeranpin. Or maybe in that situation, da'at is the top of the zeranpin. So techila is da'at. Sof is yesod. Right? Malchut is shchinte. Kucha brichu, the beginning of the top of kucha brichu is going to be chesed, or maybe da'at, depending on the circumstance, right? It's connected, right? And then the other part is yesod. Okay, let's see what he says inside. That's so clearly the rabbi here is giving sodot, but he's not explaining them in detail. Why not? Why is the rabbi, you could research to turn blue. As sod is concerned, there is no way for you to access the sod unless it's written in a book or you talk to somebody. Okay, so why is the rabbi here writing it in a way like the Ramban writes, his Perush on the Torah, and then he gives you the sod, and then he says, Hamevin Yavin. Why? When was this book written? 1250, 1260? That was still in a time when it wasn't permitted to reveal certain things publicly. That it was still given from person to person. So the goal of the rabbi writing this book is to teach you about the Sfirot and the Midot and the names of Hashem and how to connect, right? But he's leaving things. Now, he may explain later on what some of the things mean, right? But what he does is he gives you, it gives you a thing, something. If you can't understand it, that's okay. If a person is lazy, what happens? Oh, forget it, Vaita, I'm not going to look at this book and I'll go find another book. That person's not wrote you for the sod. Goodbye, you've selected yourself out. But when a person says, okay, I don't understand what he's talking about here. Baruch Hashem, we have a perush on the bottom so we can understand a little bit better. I don't understand what he's talking about here, but I'm going to continue reading on with the understanding that when I finish the book, what am I going to do? I'm going to start in the beginning and go again. And he even writes in the introduction that there are things that will be clarified later on as you go through the book. Which means there are things I'm going to bring up here, light, and then it'll go deeper later on. Okay? Because this is written in the Middle Ages, and that's before the Arizal, and before the Ramchal. So the Gilui of the Sod developed over time. There were things that were permitted to write, and there are things that were not permitted to write.
Did he start out saying Le David Maskil or Maskil David?
Le David Maskil, he said. A second. Le David Maskil, Pei Aleph. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, but that's what I understand. What is there's a David Maskil, there's Maskil David also.
Let's see on the bottom.
So then what's the Maskil?
Let's see on the bottom.
Okay.
I'll give you a simpler way to understand this, perhaps, because I think this is where he's going to go. You have a place where it says Mizmor le David, and then you have le David Mizmor. What's the difference? This is my rabbi. Explained to me, Rabbi Levi. Shibadel Chaim Tovim V'Arokim.
You go 20 a day and 1 at night?
David HaMelech was a musician. The word lam natseach is an instrument.
Choir master?
I think
It's
it's
a
also
conductor.
it's a conductor, but it has to do with
It's also an
conducting
instrument itself?
musical instruments. It's music.
But it's an instrument itself?
I don't know if it's an instrument. So we have the instruments in Haluyot, but the
Then I
conductor's
give it
purpose is to do what?
Organize the music.
To organize the music, right? And then we have David. So when David HaMelech was playing music, he was inspired to write words.
That's not the same.
That's Lam Natseach le David Mizmor. Sometimes David HaMelech thought about the words, and then the music came. Le David Mizmor. Rabbi Levi, my rabbi. One of my rabbis. Nisim Levi. He's lived in Jerusalem.
He's alive today?
Yes. He's in. He's on YouTube. He doesn't teach much. I think his son does a lot of the teaching, but I see his face on his son's YouTube channel. What is the connection between Tehillim and music?
Not much.
Really, not much.
Music?
It's
the same thing. What is the difference, or what is the connection?
what's the connection?
Each letter is a different note.
Ah.
And, it should all have a tune.
So
to it, and
according
it's
to
meant
some
be sung.
opinions, the biblical harp
22 strings.
had 22 strings. We go by octaves, so 22 is a problem because it's not a function of 8. Okay? Well, we go by sevens, really. It's 7 with a repeat,
extra.
right? But the biblical harp had 22 strings. And each letter of the Hebrew alphabet corresponded to a different note. That means Tehillim is not just beautiful words of tefillah. Tehillim is sheet music.
If you can decode it.
We don't know each letter
The top string.
and its corresponding note. If we did, we would be able to play Tehillim. So David HaMelech, sometimes from Ruach HaKodesh, was inspired by the music, and through the music came the words. And sometimes he was inspired by the words, and from words came the music. I mean, all of the Torah is Shirah, yes? Right? And technically the Tanakh. All of the books of the Tanakh have trup associated with them. Unfortunately, some congregations, some kehilot have lost the trup to some of the Tanakh. Baruch Hashem, we have the trup to the Sefer Torah. We have the trup to the Navi. But each one of the Sefarim of Sefer Ketubim also have a trup. So, of course, the well-known is Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther has a trup. Megillat Echa has a trup. What about Mishlei?
Shir Shirim.
What about Shir HaShirim? Ashkenazim have a Shir HaShirim. They have a trup for that, right? What about Daniel? What about Tehillim? Is there a trup for Tehillim? Yes? Is it no? Ashkenazim have a trup for Tehillim?
It exists. I don't know if they use it.
אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעצת רשעים. So many of the Sephardic kehilot have trup for the books of the Tanakh. You can go online. It's called pizmonim.org. And you can listen to anyone. Again, this is the Syrian tradition. Okay? They have trup for every one of the books of the Tanakh.
Pizmonim.org?
Yes. Why are Tehillim the music that's played in the Bet HaMikdash? If all of the Sfarim all the Sfarim are basically music, song,
Why is only Tehillim associated with instruments?
why is only Tehillim what is played in the Bet HaMikdash by the
What do you
Levi'im?
mean with all those instruments?
Because they were, in addition to saying the words, they were playing the music. Now let's think about that for a second. I'll prove it to you. The Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim discusses on Erev Pesach, when they bring Korban Pesach, yes? All the Jews, again, Lim Nu Yav, so not every Jew had to bring the Korban because the Korban was for 2 or 3 families, right? Could have been multiple men there. They did a count once and they saw 600,000 kidneys, right?
From 600,000 lambs.
From 600,000 lambs. That means that's how many people came, Aliyah Regel, to do Korban Pesach. What does it say? If I'm not, I think it's the Mishnah, but maybe not. I think it's in the Mishnah. How many times did they have to play the music, because it was the Mizmor of Tehillim that they played while they were doing Korban Pesach?
Is this the Tehillim that we say on Pesach?
Could be. It's a long one.
Okay.
How long? It only up to the 3rd time. By the time they got to the 3rd time repeating the Mizmor, all their korbanot were done. Now, even if you go to let's say, for argument's sake, they started doing it at 12:30. That's the earliest they could do it. And if we say Shouts Maniot is 12 hours, right? They can start from 6.5, right? Many times, since Korban Pesach is Ben Ha'arbaim, the majority of the time it was between Mincha Gedolah, Mincha Kitana, Plaga Mincha and sunset, which means Ben Ha'arbaim. So what they would do is, when there's the Korban Pesach brought, it's the only Korban that is brought after Mincha. What's supposed to happen in the Mincha sacrifice is the last sacrifice of the day. So all the sacrifices that people had to bring, right, was basically brought between Shahrit and between Mincha. There's one exception. Korban Pesach is brought after the Mincha. Why is that? Because it's connected to the next day.
No,
Korban Pesach is the Shechitav. Korban Pesach is in the 14th of Nisan. And what does the Torah call the 14th of Nisan? Pesach. From the 15th of Nisan until the 7th day, it's called Hag Hamatzot.
That's part of the reason we have to stop eating matzah early. You have to get rid of all your chametz.
Got it. But
okay.
Pesach, when the Torah calls Pesach, it's referring to the 14th of Nisan.
So why do we stop malacha early?
Oh, what's the halacha, by the way? A person who does melacha on Erev Pesach after Hatzot, lo yireh siman beracha.
Isn't that for Erev all Chagim?
No, but Erev all Chagim. Maybe Pesach might even be from the morning. We have to look carefully and see inside. Okay?
Erev Shavuot.
Okay, I don't want to get off the topic because I didn't prepare for that. Okay, let's focus on one. After Mincha, they bring Korban Pesach. So the only day they would sacrifice to Mincha at 12:30 was when? Where's Mincha Gedolah come from? There's an idea, a half an hour after Hatzot is the earliest time a person can pray Mincha. That's called Mincha Gedolah. Right? Then there's Mincha Ketana, which is halfway between 12:30 and whenever it's sunset, which is say 6 o'clock. Okay? That's called Mincha Ketana. Why? What's Mincha Gedolah? Where does this come from?
The earliest time they could bring it.
There is one time that they sacrifice the Mincha offering a half an hour after Hatzot. Huh?
For Erev Pesach?
Yeah.
And that's the reason.
When Erev Pesach falls out,
on a Friday afternoon.
Erev Shabbat. Because what happens? Cooking, roasting the Korban Pesach is not Doche Shabbat.
Oh, and they have to cook it.
So they have to have enough time to
roast it.
sacrifice the lamb, bring it back, put it on the spit over there, and roast it. So therefore, one time every couple of years, when Erev Pesach fell on Friday, they would do the mincha at 12:30, because Korban Pesach has to be Ben Arbaim, and then they would bring the Korban Pesach, and then they would go home to do the lamb. Yeah. Erev Pesach is on Shabbos. They have to wait until after. They do the shechita, but they can't cook it until after Shabbat. The shechita. Okay, but there's shechita, so they have time. They're not going to start 12:30. There's no reason they have to start early. If Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbat, I think it's like this year, yes, right? Then they go to Beit HaMikdash. They do the shechita is done because that's Doche Shabbat, right? And then what happens? They sit and wait until after Shabbat, and then they roast the lamb.
So their seder is going a long time because they have.
They start later. Well, Shlosh Kitot. Okay, what I'm bringing this up is they had a mizmor of Tehillim that they sung for each kita. And if I'm not mistaken, the Mishnah says that it was never a situation, because the Kohanim was Zrizim, right? Never a situation where they finished the third time singing the mizmor, all the Pesach was already done. All the sacrifices were done. 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. Limnu Yav. Kidneys, which means there's a lot of people. The million people didn't have to come. The only person that came to the Beit HaMikdash is the one who's bringing the Korban Pesach. But that Korban Pesach, Limnu Yav, is for many other people that don't have to come to involve themselves in the Shechita. Not everybody had to go do the Shechita. Only, again, the Zar, a regular non-Kohen, can do the Shechita, or the Kohen, right? Kabbalat Adam is where it begins the work of the Kohen, yes? The Zar can do Shechita, but Zar cannot do Kabbalat Adam, right? But that person, Limnu Yav, which means if this Korban Pesach is 30 people, and out of those 30 people, say 10 are men for argument's sake, 10 men, 9 men don't go. Only one man has to go bring the Korban Pesach, right? And everybody else is waiting for him to come back with the Korban Pesach. They're in Yerushalayim, of course, right? So 600,000 kidneys means how many millions of people? Lot, okay? Whether that's a Hagzama or not, I'm going to leave that alone, okay? But what's the idea? So that means, let's say for argument's sake, it took for each kat an hour. Reasonable, yes? Pesach usually falls out Aviv, which is the spring solstice, which means usually it's balanced, right? Sunrise is going to be 6, sunset's going to be 6, generally, okay? So what does that mean? So that means if they started doing this, they did the mincha 3:30, which is mincha ketana, right? Then they had 3 hours before Seta Kochavim, right? 3 hours before, or 2.5 hours before sunset. That means each kat, however many people were there, was completed in, say, an hour, a little less than an hour. How short, how to sing, let's say it's the Mizmor of Pesach, the one we know. It's relatively long, right?
A couple of pages.
Page and a half. Does it take you an hour to say it?
Well, we're not playing it.
Even if you're in a Moroccan shul, does it take you an hour to say it? No.
Everyone wants to go home.
Why don't you try saying it in an hour? Not easy.
So you're saying that they played it.
They were
really low,
playing it
down
and
tempo?
singing it at the same time.
At what type of tempo?
Again, Limnu Yav. The Levim had also Limnu Yav. So the people playing instruments had someone else bring Korban for them. And the Kohanim also. They had shifts of Kohanim, right? They would line up, and it was like on a conveyor belt. Boom, boom, boom. Because remember, the blood can't, once they do the shechita, the blood starts to clot. Once the blood is clotted, it doesn't go on the mizbeach, which means someone has to be mimares. Someone has to be, exactly, which means that they would pass it along, shaking it along until it gets the mizbeach, and then they would pour the mizbeach. Whole process. Josephus, by the way, writes about this. He witnessed it. We have no more time?
that good stuff to read, Josephus?
I don't know. I think this is better. All right, can we just do one on the inside over here? Because I feel bad. We sort of we didn't even do what we did last week, but it was okay. Okay. Bemidat hatov nistakel v'nityaetz. That's what it says here. Just where is that one? 1 second.
I think we did.
We did that one last week. You think we did that 2 weeks ago?
No, last week.
Ayen techilat perak vav she'arich rabbeinu shekol hanivraim nivru b'kav hadin. Look at Parak Vav. What is Parak Vav in this book? We're going to discuss the Midah of Din, which is Givurah, which is the name Elokim, written as Elokim. Okay? That's called Kav Hadin. All of the creatures, Nivreu b'Kav Hadin. They are Yosher, Lefi Tafkidam b'Gilui Kvodo b'Briyah. What does that mean? That all of the creatures, all of the creation was created by Kavadin. How do we understand that? Huh?
What is it?
Kavadin starts. It's only mentioning Givurah right now.
What's Kavadin? What's the three
The beginning of Kavadin is Givurah. Why is my question? Maybe not stating my question properly. Why it says the world was initially going to be created with Din,
Which had to mix in Rachamim.
and then Hashem realized the world could not be existing with Din, so he mixed in Rachamim. That's why in the entire creative process in Breshit, we only see the name Elokim. We don't see the name Yud Ke Vav Ke Elokim until when? Until Ela told us Shamayim Haaretz Behibaream Beyom Bero Adonai Elohim Eretz Shamayim. That's the first time we see the name Yud Ke Vav Ke, which means the entire Maaseh Breshit is Elokim. Why? From a Kabbalah, from Sod point of view.
Because he created the first seven Shaya Kuloidim.
I got it, but why? God could have clearly started the world with Rachamim
And then
or with
mix in.
Chesed.
He did that also, and didn't they had
Why is it Din? There is no existence for any physical being without Din.
The laws.
What is Din? Limitation. We have no existence in infinity. It was necessary, or Hashem chose this, it was his Ratzon, but we understand his Ratzon. We don't understand his Ratzon, but his Ratzon was created the world with Din, because what is the first aspect of creation according to the Kabbalah? What is the beginning of creation? The Tzimtzum. That's the beginning, yes? The beginning of, I shouldn't say creation, that's a bad word, okay? The beginning of there being a world, an olam, right? Being there's a nivra and there's the boreh. The beginning process of the nivra is the boreh had to have a tzimtzum. Not he had a tzimtzum, he didn't have it. His shefa, the shefa of the boreh had to be limited. Why? Because we cannot exist in infinite. Therefore, what is the tzimtzum? It's din. Yes? Are we maskim on that? Okay, that's why some of the Sfarim say that the halal is the malchut of the Ein Sof. Take that for what it is. Okay? Malchut is din. It has the ability also to be rachamim when it gives, right? But malchut is a kibul. What is kibul? Limits. So the world started with limitation. According to some opinions, what is the tzimtzum? It's the beginning of the concept of limitation, which before did not exist. The creation of limit, that's the tzimtzum. And to understand it deeper, he negated from his shefa negated the absence of limits. Infinity is absence of limit. One second. The tzimtzum is the negation of absence of limits. When you have two negatives that come together, what do you have? A positive. So therefore, we see the beginning of din, the beginning of limit, through that negation of limitlessness. That's the tzimtzum. No.
Consecration of limits.
You started saying that the animals created by the Buddha, that was the din, by din.
Gvura's din,
Yeah.
which means givura, right? Where is the source of the din of givura? It's not. It's all rachamim. But where is the source of the din of givura? It's in the binah. The binah is kulo rachamim. But it's the source. It's the potential for limitation. Givura is actual limitation.
So the source of limitation is rachamim. The source of limitation
No,
din
the
is-
source of limitation is binah.
which is
It's
everything
complete rachamim. Keter, chokhmah, and binah is all rachamim, right? But the din, the source of limitation, the root of din is in the binah. The potential is a better word than. What is the? Again, animals, everything physical, everything that is part, no, I shouldn't say physical, everything that is part of the creation can only exist within limits. Right over here, Shekol HaNivraim, Nivra'u B'Kavadin. I didn't say animals. Everything. Angels, do they exist in infinity or they exist with limitation? Of course. You have Raphael, you have Michael, you have Gabriel. Since we understand that these are different angels, therefore there has to be limitation. However you want to call it, but we see limitation begins where? In the world of the Bria. Yes? In the world of the Atzilut, there is no limitation. In the world of the Atzilut, there is filters, there is lenses between, but there is a direct connection. There's no, in the language, pargod in the Atzilut. The first pargod, the first diaphragm, the first stop, the first whatever is where? Between the Atzilut and the Bria. That's the first place where there's a pargod. Me'achorea pargod. Very good. Chazak, 100%. Look what the language of the Chachamim. And people think Talmud is just Talmud. It's more. It is so there. We just don't appreciate it until we understand this. Me'achorea pargod. Chazak. Okay. Wow. And that pargod is the aspaklaria. Me'ira or lo me'ira, depends on the person. Moshe versus everybody else. That's what you can see into. The aspaklaria, the lens you can see into. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to see to the Netzach and, no, the other prophets were able to see into the Netzach and the Hod. Moshe Rabbeinu was the only one who could see to the Tiferet. 1 second. And because Moshe was able to see to the Tiferet, what does that mean? What did Moshe Rabbeinu bring to the world? Torah. Why? Because Torah is the Tiferet. The essential part of the Ze'er Anpin is the Tiferet. That's the body, shall we say, of the Ze'er Anpin. The Torah, written Torah, is the body of the Halakha. The Torah Sheba'al Peh is the Malchut. It's the Keli of the Torah Shebichtav.
Because without it,
You
can't
can't understand the Torah shebichtav unless you go through the Torah shebe'al peh. Just like a person can't approach tefillah without going through the malchut. Adonai sfatai tiftach ufi agit tilatecha. It's all the same.
No, how did then what was he became blind?
Because he was looking into a Torah Shah. That's what it says in the Peshat. Yitzchak became blind because kitzayid befiv. And the Gemara over there says, a person who looks at the face of Rasha becomes blind. Okay. So we understand why the world was created with Givurah.
Because of the shochat that he accepted shochat from Esau.
Okay, no, that's after. It's Sky Befiv. Esav was Side Befiv. What does it mean? He was hunting him with his mouth, which means Esav was talking to him all the time, whatever great tzaddik he was. But he's like Chazir. What's the problem with the Chazir? He puts his foot forward, looks like he's kosher because he's got a split hoof, but inside he's not a ruminant stomach. Therefore, inside, you look at the pnimiyut of the Chazir, he's charef. From the chitzonios, the Chazir looks like he's kasher. The only animal in the world that has a chitzon that is kasher and a pnimius is taref. That's Esav. His chitzon was kasher, kitzayid befiv. But inside he was rasha. And that caused the tzaddik to be blind. Why it's called the tzaddik to be blind? Because he's looking at the hoof. So from a chitzoni point of view, he's able to see that he looks kosher. But he's not appreciating the resha that's on the inside, and that's affecting his vision. And because Yitzchak was a man of din, he goes by what he sees. Dayan. Dayan. How does he make the judgment in court? Jewish Dayan. By his eyes. Kohen. When he wants to determine if someone is a metzorah. Ene ha-kohen. Which means in the world, you only have eyes. What you see. The chitzonios. Dayan is not allowed to look into the pnimius of the individual and say, you know what, he's really innocent. If they can't make a case, what happened if right before that, the guy grabbed it out of his hand and pulled it to him? We're not talking about a case of a Baba Metzia where it's half and half. We're talking about right before, the guy walked over to the guy and grabbed the property and holds it. Now he goes to the court. How is the Dayan going to rule? The guy's going to say, he took it from me. This guy's going to say, I didn't take it from you. What is the Dayan going to do? Goes by his eyes. He sees you have it, therefore it's yours. In Shamayim, they know that's not the case. But Dayanim can only work with what's in front of their eyes. That is a problem.
No circumstantial evidence.
Correct. No circumstantial evidence. And not allowed to judge whether he deserves it or not. That's not allowed. A Dayan is not allowed to say, you know what, he's an ani, I'm going to vote for him because he can't afford to pay. So what did David HaMelech do the Malchut? When David HaMelech was a judge, and he saw a poor person in judgment versus a rich person, when he was a Dayan, he had to say the poor person's got to pay. And what did then David HaMelech do? He took it out of his own pocket, gave it to the poor person so he can give it to the rich person. Aha. Because sometimes peace requires, there's something that comes before shalom. Shlomo Melech is shalom, yes? What comes before shalom? Okay, I'm talking about from Pasuk. Before we get to shalom, we have to have emet. V'ha'emet, v'ha'shalom, ahevu. There is no shalom if there's no emet. Just tell that to the Israelis over there who want to sign peace treaties with all these people. There is no shalom if there's no emet. Why is there going to be shalom in the time of the Mashiach? Because there's going to be emet. And when there's emet, there is shalom.
And everyone's emet is the same.
What's that?
There's one emet, not two different.
That's correct. Emet is singular. There's ultimate truth. Okay? So what the kavadin, the yosher is what? Lefi tafkidam begilui, which means there's a tafkid that is revealed. What is that tafkid? To reveal the kavod of Hashem. That is the tafkid of the bria. As we say, hakol bara lichvodo. The kevan shekol bria hi tuvo, and because all of the bria is the goodness of Hashem, hiskimu kol briot afilo hamechoraot. All of the creatures of the world, even the ugly ones, al tsurat briatam v'chetzu bazeh, on how they were created and they desired it. The creatures, even the ones that were created ugly, desired that.
I think this is where
Why did they desire it? Because since they were created ugly, they understood it's the ratzon of Hashem.
This is how they're displaying their kavod Hashem.
This is how they're created. V'alzeh amru Chazal, and this our rabbi said in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Kol ma'aseh breshit b'da'atan nivra'u, b'komatan nivra'u, b'tzivyonan nivra'u. All of the creatures of the creation, all the ma'aseh breshit, with their dot, with their knowledge, they were created. B'komatan, with their how they stood up, they were created. U'b'tzivyonan, and their attributes, they were created. And there was heskem, there was agreement. The katav sham rabbeinu shezeh sod ma she'amar b'maaseh breshit. And our rabbi over there, I'm not sure Sham. Where is Sham? Oh, in Perek Vav. Rabbi Gigatilia is going to explain this in more detail in Perek Vav, which is what's brewing here. That's why we don't understand what he's talking about here, because it's from Perek Vav, right? It says over here, shezeh sod ma she'amar b'maaseh breshit. Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa v'hineh tov me'od. On the sixth day. The kavanah, sheb'shoshei abriya, in the roots of the creation, hu chanu kol hanivraim, all the creatures of the creation were prepared, the chol hashpaot, and all of the influence, right, all of the abundance, leha'amid et ha'olam al tachlit hatov. That means the purpose for all of the creatures, purpose is to raise up the world for the purpose of good. Shehu, and what is the good? Lekasher elyonim v'tachtonim, to connect above and below. Ulaha'amidam b'kiyumam hanitzchi, and to raise them up and to support them in their everlasting status, which means when they're connected, it's everlasting. Tieh nishmato tzura b'tzura chaim. V'abechina shel re'iyah, and what is this idea of re'iyah, of seeing? Vayar Elokim, it says, and God saw. He shekadosh baruch hu nityaetz v'histakel. When it says vayar, what does it mean? He saw. Nityaetz, he advised himself, kavyachol, and he looked. V'chiber et kol hapratim shel habriya, and he connected all of the pieces of the bria, the tochen shel habriya, for the purposes of the bria, shehu retzono lehetiv, which is for the purposes of God has a will to give goodness. V'zot al yedei she'nivraim, and this, how is this goodness given? By way of the creatures of the world. Yakiru oto, will recognize him. V'galu b'ma'asehem v'tafkidam kol echad b'komato v'tzivyono kevod shamayim. And how do they show that recognition? By revealing through their deeds and their job, to their works, everyone according to their level and their attributes, kavod shamayim. We said this before in another way. Gadol Talmud hamevi lemaaseh. Learning Torah in of itself is tremendously valuable. Tremendously valuable. But
That's a low level.
the highest value is when that Torah is brought to maaseh. Now,
What Torah the Nivra?
we just read Parashat Mishpatim. Ki tikne eved ivri sheshanim ta'avodu b'shevi'i yetze lechofshi hinam. When a person's studying that Torah, what's the maaseh? Okay, but you're studying a gadol Talmud and mevi lemaaseh. This maaseh eved ivri, we don't have eved ivri nowadays. What's the maaseh? I'm not clear what the maaseh is. You're saying machshava and dibur, but that's not maaseh. Okay, but there has to be maaseh also. Otherwise, you shouldn't be studying that first. You should be studying stuff that have maaseh.
Yeah, but if you weren't going to kohen, there's no way to do the maaseh kohen. You can only do the machshava v'dibur.
Okay, I'll give you two things to think about. Rabbi Akiva taught that there's a way for the mamzer to correct his seed. Litaher, not himself. He can't do anything for himself. But there's a way that he can purify his children. How?
A mamzer has to go with mamzer.
How? That's still a mamzer.
Okay, so their children.
Adolam. Adolam. They marry anybody, adolam. Mamzer. Mamzer forever.
So you're saying this mamzer and mamzer have a baby.
Listen. And it's no coincidence that it's, if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Akiva. Akiva ben Yosef, who was this. Oh, very good. Yosef, his father was a ger. Rabbi Akiva was ben Gerim. So what does Rabbi Akiva say? It says like this. A mamzer sells himself as an eved ivri. He's married to a mamzeret. Any children he has with the mamzeret, the mamzerim. When he's married and he goes into the eved ivri situation, the Torah says the Adon can give him a wife. That wife the Adon gives is what? Goya. She's Eved Knaanit. She's a Goya that underwent a partial conversion. It's not a conversion. She accepts upon herself all the laws, right? But she's not Jewish. Okay? He gives her that woman. That's the only situation where a Jew is allowed to marry to someone like that, or be with someone like that. And he has children with that woman.
This is in addition to mamzer?
In addition to the mamzeret. The children are from her. Since she's Goya, the children are Goyim.
And since they're going, they cannot be mamzering.
That's right.
This is a.
Now, once the Adon frees the Eved Ivri, the Adon also frees the woman and the children. Now what happens? And if the Adon frees them, he has a right to do that, it's his property, right? He frees the woman and he frees the children. When an Eved Knaanit is freed, what does she become? A Jew. When the children are freed, they become Gerim, they're Jew. What happens then? They're not mamzerim.
Cut off that mamzeris.
So the children that come from the wife that the Adon gives, there's a way for his zera to be mitaken.
He's still a mamzer. And he can do
He's still a mamzer for the rest of his life. And any children he has with his wife that they're mamzeret, a mamzerim forever. But children that he has with this woman who is given to him by the Adon, When the Eved Ivri goes free and then the Adon frees the children, they are now Jews. I don't know. Maybe if there's a situation where we had a mamzer, this would be a solution for that. Rabbi Akiva says this is, again, so we see there is maaseh here. Now, let's understand what else. When you open up Zohar and Parashat Mishpatim, you have Sabbat the Mishpatim. All of this Eved Ivri and this Hafshi Hinam, this is all teaching us about what? Gilgul. Gilgul Neshamot. What is the purpose of a Gilgul? Meaning, a person made a big mistake when he was alive before. He can come back up to how many times? 4. What do we see 4? נוצר חסד אלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, וחטא ונקה, לא ינא פוקד עוון אבות, על בנים, על שילשים, על רבעים. So in that pasuk, there's a remez that the Abba is not the Ben, and the Ben Beno and the Ben Beno is really the Abba coming back to fix what he made a mistake. So that's one type of Gilgul where a person comes back because of something they did that was bad, and they have to come and fix that. Maybe that's what the Rambam's talking about when he's discussing Teshuvah Gimura. But there's another type of Gilgul that a person can come back 100 times. And that's if there's a tzaddik who needs to have hashpa'ah in a certain situation in Olam Hazeh, that tzaddik can come down as a neshama yetera and come as a Gilgul in order to have a person go in a different direction. But again, from the perspective of the person, it's an ibur. From the perspective of the soul who's coming into a body, that's a Gilgul, is coming alive again. And the tzaddik, by the way, there's a big risk of a Gilgul. What's the big risk of a Gilgul? You screwed up worse when you come back again. That tzaddik doesn't happen. Only happens with the Rasha. That's all discussed in Parashat Mishpatim. Now, I don't know the details because I was studying it on Shabbat morning. I was just blown away over and over again. It was incredible. But all of these Pisukim are remez to all the what we just talked about and more. What's that? Okay. Okay. I'm not sure what you're saying.
No, I'm just thinking where it might be.
Yehuda Fetaya is talking not about, he's talking there about Dibuk.
You got to get a spirit out of it.
But that's a spirit that's a neshama that made mistakes. That's not a tzaddik, and that's not technically a Gilgul either, if I'm not mistaken. He's coming in as an extra soul in order to push the person in the wrong direction. But what's I know the book you're talking about, Minhat Yehuda, amazing book. I knew a guy previously that, when we would go on trips to the Far East, he didn't behave himself. So he's coming to Shavuot and he wanted to learn together. I said, we can learn anything I want. He's like, anything you want to learn. So what did I learn? Minhat Yehuda. After that, he said, you spoiled my trip. No, I didn't. I saved your soul. This is the kind of book, the hairs go on the back of your head, and you're like, oh my gosh, whoa. Haruchot Misaprot. He basically was an exorcist, and he did all kinds of exorcisms in Bavel, even though his teacher, the Ben Ish Chai, warned him not to do it. He did it anyway. He had tremendous problems in his life. And anyway, but what he did is he went and he would remove these souls that were basically in limbo, that would attach themselves to people, and he would remove them. And when he was removing them, he would ask them questions. What was dying like? Was Chibut HaKever like? What they had no idea of Gehenam. They had no idea of Gan Eden. Why? Because they didn't have the zechut to go to hell, and they certainly didn't have the zechut to go to heaven. But what they would do is this is called kafakala, which means they're being catapulted from one place to another. That's this idea. They're called atilain, which basically naked. There's souls around in the mishatet in the world that have no body attached to them. But when someone sins in a similar way that they sinned, that neshama can then go in. That's the person go inside and continue. What is it? The Talmud says this in a different way. It says if a person wants to do good, Hashem helps him to do good. If a person wants to do bad, Hashem helps him to do bad. This is one of the dirachim with the tzaddik coming back and helping someone to continue to do good, or the rasha who's floating around coming inside the person who started. You have the person themselves has to start the resha, but once they start, boom, then this one comes in and then he has to remove them. Again, that's a different idea. This is Messiah. Hashem is Messiah. You are driving the bus. You're the engine of the bus, and you get to point it in what direction you want. Point it in the right direction, Hashem helps you to continue to point into the right direction. Point in the wrong direction, Hashem helps you to continue to point it in. And this is one of the Rachim he does it. What's that? Yes. he was the rabbi. He was the supposed prophet for Shabtai Tzvi. Whoa! I mean, that book. If you haven't read that book. It's in English, by the way, if you want to read it in English. Yes.
They have excerpts of it. You can peek into it on Sperm.
You want to just go through it. It's.
Do you have it?
I know. He was too good for Gehenna. But remember, so these, what's the difference between Gehenna and Kafakala?
Gehenna has a time limit.
Correct. That after they finish Kafakala, then they got to go to Gehenna, right? But what's the difference? How do we understand because both of them involve pain. When the soul is not occupying another body, it's suffering through this catapulting thing. Yes? What's the difference? Gehenna is also a level of suffering.
It brings you to a higher place. It fixes you again.
What's
Cleanse the soul.
How would we understand the difference in suffering between Gehenna? The suffering itself. I'm not asking about the results. The suffering in Gehenna brings a person to Gan Eden. The suffering in Kafakala brings a person to Gehenna, which then brings him to Gan Eden. But what's the difference in the suffering of Gehenna versus Kafakala? Okay, maybe again aspects of the soul. I'm looking to see what is the difference in suffering. There is pain and there is torture. What's the difference between pain and torture? Okay, here's pain. Person has, God forbid, has cancer. God forbid. And they have pain. But the pain is constant. Human beings, Baruch Hashem with good medications, people can adapt to a constant level of pain. We shouldn't be tested, right? People have all kinds of pain. A person's older, this hurts, that hurts. We don't fetch too much because it doesn't change anything. The fetching doesn't make it better. We just adapt. When pain is same across, a person, it's miserable, it's uncomfortable, but one can survive. That's Gehenna.
A constant.
What's Kafakala?
Comes and goes.
Pain and then nothing. Pain and then nothing. That's called torture. Because when the pain goes away, person relaxes, but they know it's coming back.
They just don't know when.
They just don't know when. And they don't know the intensity when it comes back either. That's torture. That's the difference in Gehenam, whether it's Gehenam of Shelag or whether it's Gehenam of fire. We know these two concepts?
The Shelag one, I have it.
Okay.
Oh, okay, wait. The seventh day. You keep Shabbat in this world. You go to Gehenam. On the Shabbat of Gehenam, you got to rest from the fire.
What is the Gehenam of Shelag? What is the Gehenam of... Now, if you notice from a human person point of view, if you hold yourself something that is very cold, what's the pain your hand feels?
It'll
Burn.
You'll touch dry ice.
It's called frostbite. It's really frost burn. A person's skin, the same damage to a person's skin happens whether it's cold or whether it's hot. Okay? So, but what's the difference? Where is Gehenam of Shelag? Where is Gehenam of fire? Gehenam of Shelag is a person who didn't do mitzvot aseh that he had to go to Gehenam for. Why is it Shelag? Why doesn't a person do mitzvot aseh?
The cold.
Cold. I'm in my own life. It's my life. I don't do what I want. That's inaction. That's cold. A person who goes ahead and does something a lo ta'aseh, which is level of rebellion, that's different than avoiding a ta'aseh. A lo ta'aseh, that is fire. So we understand from the Peshat, Shabbat is aseh and lo ta'aseh. Why is from the Peshat? Why is Shabbat aseh and lo ta'aseh? Because it's a question, do you get a reward for not doing a lo ta'aseh? No.
You just don't get a punishment.
When does a person get a reward for not doing a lo ta'aseh? When they are challenged and they overcome the challenge. Then the fum tzara agra. Then there's reward because of the tsar that the person had to avoid doing a lo ta'aseh.
No gain.
Okay? So that's lo ta'aseh. So, but technically, if the person is not challenged, a person is born Shomer Shabbat, from the time he's a kid, always Shomer Shabbat, it's not even a temptation. Just like a person is born kosher, eating a lobster is no temptation. Not to say they have other temptations. Everybody's got temptations, right? But the lobster doesn't bother them that much. Why? Because it's disgusting. They've never tasted it. They don't know what it tastes like. Why? It's disgusting. It's not even a connection. About tshuva, on the other hand, why is it b'makom shebalei tshuva umdim em tzadikim gimrim lamod? Because the Baal Tshuva knows what the lobster tastes. He knows what the shrimp tastes like. He knows what it's Halal Shabbat, which means for him there's more tsar in overcoming the Yetzer Hara, because the Yetzer Hara can say, remember how you were before? You don't miss that? Come on. You don't do the shopping days on Shabbat? It's amazing. So that's why, so for people who are Baal Tshuva, every time they're resisting that lo ta'aseh they used to do, they're getting reward. A person is not a Baal Tshuva. FFB, there's certain things we're all challenged with, regardless of a Baal Tshuva or not. Okay? When a person resists the temptation successfully, then they get reward for that. Shabbat, Hashem says, you know what? I want to give you reward for 25 hours every single week. So what does he do? Mitzvat aseh. So now, every time you're Shomer Shabbat, you get mitzvat aseh. It's not just a person is asur to do melacha. Leshevet milasot melacha is mitzvat aseh, which is exactly what the Rambam calls it. Shvitat, the shvita, which means resting is a physical thing. To rest from creative work, that's an action by not doing creative work. Therefore, you get mitzvat aseh all Shabbat.
And the Oneg Shabbat is a different mitzvah?
Oneg Shabbat is also, that's a D'Rabbanan, that's also part of pleasure. Litaneg al Hashem, right? Now.
It's just the cessation of doing work, already mitzvah.
Okay, so that's from the perspective of the Peshat. Based on what we just discussed, why is there an Aseh and Lo Ta'aseh for Shabbat? So he can get the Gehinnom of Sheleg and the Gehinnom of fire. He didn't do mitzvah taseh, which is Shivita and Shabbat. And he did lo taseh, which is lo taseh kol malacha. So he gets Gehinnom of Sheleg and Gehinnom of fire.
At the same time?
At the same time or separate? No, not really, actually. Okay, so the thing is, if a person has a burn, okay, God forbid a person gets his hand burned, you put it under cold water, yes? Cold water. It stops the damage, right? But you take an ice cube and put it on your hand, you stick your hand in the freezer, or do you put your hand in dry ice? No, because what's going to happen, you put your hand in dry ice, within a very short period of time, you're getting burned from the dry ice. That's Gehinnom for a person Mehalel Shabbat. Okay? All right. Let's just finish up over here. Wow, we're amazing today. So he said, let's just go back 1 second. What does it mean, Vayar Elokim in Bereshit? What does it mean, Vayar Elokim? He says over here, Shekadosh Baruch Hu nityaetz v'histakel. He gave himself his own counsel, and he looked. What? V'chiber et kol hapratim shel habriyah, and he made a connection between all of the details of the creation. Letochen shel habriyah, according to the contents of the briyah, shehu retzono lehetiv. The purpose of the creation is for what? Retzono lehetiv. That's what the Arizal says in the beginning. That's Chaim. The purpose of the creation is retzono, to fulfill his desire lehetiv. The zot ayedei, and how is this happening? Shanivraim yakiru oto. They recognize him. V'galu b'maasehem v'tafkidam kol echad b'komato. And everyone in their own maasim and in their own level, what do? They reveal kavod shamayim. That is the job of all human beings in the world, and especially the Jewish people, to reveal kavod hashamayim. And how do we do that? By connecting the worlds. And how do we connect the worlds? Torah, mitzvot, and ma'asim tovim. And this is what it says in the Tefillah, Hamhadesh betuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshit. Shehu yitbarach shemo, mashpia be'olamot. He gives influence to the world. Kol rega, every second. Ba'olamot. All of them. Why is that necessary? What happens to the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah if he removes his ratzon for them to exist?
Then this world doesn't have.
They stop existing. The Atzilut exists, always existed, right? But it was subsumed within the affinity, which means when he removes the tzimtzum, it goes back to how it was before, or pashut, which means it's all nullified within infinity. So Atzilut is nullified in the Ein Sof. That's what would happen if Hashem removed his will for the world to exist. So just like we understand, that's why it's important to understand how it started. That's Etz Chaim, right? Also important how it would, God forbid, disappear. Okay? Ha'oseh b'chol yom tamim ma'aseh bereshit. Continue on. Ha'oseh ha'mechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamim ma'aseh bereshit. That's what it says. Shu yitbarach shemo mashpia be'olamot. Why yitbarach? Why the Shem is the Kav. The Kav is mashpia be'olamot. Yes? Kol rega. Every minute. The Shifat Or Hadash, and the light of Or Hadash. What is Or Hadash? All right, I'm not going to explain that now. It's going to take a little too much time. No. Or Hadash. Every time there's a Tzimtzum, there's Or Hadash. Tzimtzum is not just one. There is Tzimtzum after Tzimtzum after Tzimtzum.
Right now.
Every time there's a Tzimtzum, Or Hadash. So with the Tzimtzum that everybody knows, which is the beginning, what was the Or Hadash? The Kav.
Yotzer HaNoires.
Chazat. Now we understand why it's there, right? Okay, good. Okay. And what L'Kiyumam? First of all, there's a Kiyum. There always has to be Shefa of Kiyum. If the Shefa of Kiyum is removed, everything goes back to Or Pashut. Yes? And Sof only, nothing else. Right? So the fact that there is world means there is Kiyum. Very simple. People ask, where is God? Show me where he is. I want to see him. Does the table in front of you exist? Well, that's because God is existing and giving Shefa to the world. You exist. Why? Because you're getting Shefa to exist. If there was no Shefa for Kiyum, the world would cease to exist. If any individual part of the world lost its Shefa for Kiyum, Chas v'Shalom, it would cease to exist. Not only Kiyumam, there's another factor. Ulahanhigam lefi hasidarim shesider b'shoshei abriya. And what is lahanhigam? To guide them, to govern them. Ready? Lefi hasidarim, according to the seder, or the sidarim, the orders, shesider b'shoshei abriya, that he ordered in the root of creation. Betikunim shenitzrechim hanivraim, with corrections that the creatures of the world need, the creations, I should say, litaken b'sheshet alafim shana, to correct over 6,000 years.
What is he referring to with this? This is it's Chaim. What's on the top part? What's in the Shaare Orah?
B'midat hatov nistakel v'nityaetz. That's what he's explaining. In the midah of tov, it says about Kaviyachol Hashem, nistakel v'nityaetz. So he's explaining what does this mean, nistakel v'nityaetz. He's explaining what it means, vayar et kol asher asa v'hine tov me'od, vayar elokim. Every time it says vayar elokim, what does this mean? Nityaetz v'nistakel. Now let's go to, what is this he's talking about? Lefi hasidarim shesider b'shoshei abriya. What is that?
The order of the purposes of everything that was created.
Okay, there's an order that's in the creation.
Like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4.
We have that day 1, day 2, day 4, day 5, 6.
Everything's
Yes?
created on a certain day.
That's just 6 days. What about the rest of the world? That's 6 days of creation. What he's saying here is that there's an order that is established in the Bria that covers all of history.
So all of history repeats according to the. So well, the 7 days of creation are like the 5 books.
If I'm not mistaken, his teacher or his teacher's teacher was the Ramban.
Okay, today's teachers are
What does he? It's either his teacher or his teacher's teacher. He's I think he's a student of the Ramban, maybe, or the student of student. I don't know, but somehow the Ramban influenced Rabbi Yosef Gikatilia to some extent. What does the Ramban say about Sheshet Yemei Breshit? That's a lot. Listen, if you want to find a pasuk that got more explanations than any other pasuk in the Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And since the Arizal said that there are only 2 books that we should be learning from the Rishonim, one is Shaare. What's the other one? There are Perush of the Ramban on the Torah.
which is found in the law, but he's saying 6.
Okay, so now, what does the Ramban say about Sheshet Yemei Breshit?
They were longer than 24 hours?
You have to look. Do me a favor, for homework, I don't give homework. For homework, study the Ramban on the first pasuk or 2. It's someplace in the beginning, okay? And this is what he says. Istakel be'oraita ubara alma. What does that mean?
Looked into the Torah and created the world. But
What words did the rabbi use?
Istakel,
Istakel. What did he just say over here? Istakel v'nityaetz. Same word. Histakel. So histakel be'oraita ubara alma. What did the rabbi just say here? There's a seder or sidarim of the creation. Yes? And there's a meaning what? It's not just the 6 days. It's 6,000 years. So Ramban says, if you look at each day of creation, it's telling you what's going to happen in the millennia that corresponds to that day. So by Or, that corresponds from 0 to 1,000. Mavdil ben Or Lamaim, Shamayim Lamaim, that corresponds from 1,000 to 2,000. Tadasha, that's 2,000 to 3,000. Merot Birki Shamayim, that's 3,000 to 4,000. The beginning of the trees, and that's 4,000 to 5,000. Creation of man, 5,000 to 6,000. And he shows, again, the Ramban lived in the beginning of the 6th millennia. He shows how each one of these days corresponds to the history that's written in the Torah. That's also, we know about afterwards, what happened afterwards. He shows all of that there. And basically he's saying, Histakel ba'oraita, what does that mean? Not just one time. God doesn't have a past. He doesn't have a present. He doesn't have a future. He only has a present. Histakel ba'oraita is right now. He's looking into the Torah, and this is how he's manhig the world. He made a mistake at the end because he thought, he looks at it, is he says that the Mashiach has to come in the 6th millennia, yes? And he figured the Mashiach was going to come in his time. But he forgot something. What did he forget? And all the Mefarshim say, he must have forgotten something. Vayerev vayevoker. First is darkness and then is light. So the Or can't come until 5,500. The Ramban lived around 5,000, 550, 550. He thought he was going to be, no, he's still in the darkness. They write, he so much wanted for the Mashiach to come that this tremendous Chacham was blinded by the fact that he has to go Erev and then Boker. But once you hit 5,500, what's that called? That's called Boker. No, Inquisition is no. 5,500? Let's think about that. 5,500 was, say, 500 years ago. 1,500, it's after the Inquisition. After the end of the darkness was the Inquisition. Ramban's 1260. Inquisition's 1492, and a little bit after. So the beginning of the Or, what is the beginning of the Or? 1550, shall we say, yes? What happened in 1550? What else? Aha! Arizal, 1550. This is the beginning of the Or, of the Geulah. It began with the Shulchan Aruch, trying to unify the Jewish people under one halachic rule, and trying to bring the Samacha with the Rambam's rabbis. He was the first person in 2,000 years to have Samacha. We'll leave that alone for now. We give Samacha to 2 other people, but it didn't carry. Anyway, and where was the Shulchan Aruch? What makes his contribution so valuable? It's in Eretz Yisrael. People don't appreciate that. He's in the land of Israel writing this. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, not Polin, not Sfarad. Ki mitzion, from Israel, Yerushalayim. He wasn't in Yerushalayim, okay, he was in Tzfat. But we see the beginning halachically Shulchan Aruch, right? We also see the Arizal. Yes? It's the beginning of the Or. And how much has the Or increased over the past 500 years? Tremendously. Ramchal, the Gaon of Vilna, we have the Rashash, We have the Baal Shem Tov.
That period six
Look
months.
at the Orah. Why not?
Achidah doesn't mention him in the.
Well, Chidah is not the only boss in town. The Chidah is not the only boss in town.
Does the Ramchan mention bring down quote anybody? He doesn't quote.
Neither did the Rambam. So?
It's not in the Rambam's. He doesn't even mention Rambam. He doesn't quote.
Okay, let's think for a second.
Who's getting the
What
who's getting the
arguably is the best book of Musar, a handbook of Musar written in the past 400 years? No. Accepted by, I would say, the entire world, yes? The Gaon Mivilna basically said about Mesilat Yesharim what? There is not one extra word in the first 11 chapters of the book. And the Gaon Mivilna, why is he called the Gaon? I mean, the period of the Gaonim finished around 700. Why is he called the Gaon Mivilna? Because he was brilliant. And the Gaon Mivilna, when he was studying the books, the Ramchal, Mesilat Yesharim specifically, he said he would go on foot to meet him if he was still alive. So tell me something. What did the Gaon Mivilna see in the Mesilat Yesharim that was so amazing that he writes, the Gaon Mivilna, that anytime he had to go into the city, when he was going to be exposed to Vilna, what did he have to do? He read Mesilat Yesharim before he went. Why? Again, everybody's got challenges in Musar. Because Mesilat Yesharim is not just about Musar. It's contained his entire Kabbalistic system within the Mesilat Yesharim. Okay. I have a gra. That's good enough for me. If the Gaon Mivilna, who got his system from reliable sources, Maharal, if I'm not mistaken, correct? The teacher was the Maharal Miprag, if I'm not mistaken. Somehow there's a connection between the gra and the Maharal. Okay? So if the Gaon Mivilna is saying he would go on foot to learn from him, I don't care where his sources are. They picked on the Rambam after he wrote the Mishneh Torah in his time because he didn't put sources. Right? And they burned his books, partially because he wrote things in the Moreh that were shikul dat. I guess they didn't, whatever. And partially because in the Mishneh Torah, he didn't write sources. And he said things there that people never heard of before. Why? Because they didn't have the sources that he had. Europe had certain limitations of sources. The Muslim countries then didn't have problems with Jewish books. The Christians didn't like Jewish books. I'm talking about handwritten ones. This is before the printing press. So the Rambam had access to things like the Yerushalmi, which some of the Yerushonim did not have access to. He didn't write his sources. They burned his books. What happened? 50 years after they burned his books, in France, they burned 24 cartloads of Talmud, which ended the Tosafot in France, and they had to move to Germany. And some moved to Spain. Yes? And what did Rabbi Yonah, why did he write Shaare Teshuvah? Chatati aviti pashati, because we burned the books of the Rambam. Now, is the Rambam Ramchal the same category? No, Rambam is halakha. But he didn't write sources either. Just because a person doesn't write sources, is what they're saying makes sense. Just take the Mesilat Yesharim alone. Is anything he's writing in there? There is nothing I'm writing in this book you haven't heard already. There's no chidush here. So if there's no chidush, then what's the danger? Anyway, I love the Ramchal. I have a book for you. It's called Sod La Yesharim, written by Rabbi Mordechai Shariki. He's got a version of Mesilat Yesharim, And what he does is he shows by all the other works of the Ramchal what he's really talking about in the Mesilat Yesharim. It will blow your mind. And it makes sense because Ramchal was writing his own Zohar, basically, from the Magid.
That was the problem.
Problem. Shulchan Aruch and a Magid.
Yeah, that's two different generations. It's not.
Shulchan Aruch is 150 years before. The Ben Ish Chai had a Magid. He was after. What's the issue there? Ben Ish Chai had a Magid. There's no question about it. He writes about it. Ben Ish Chai, he was sitting at night, Chatzot Laila, learning Torah. And he had a Goya who was serving him. And she asked, yes? And asked, Rabbi, would you like a cup of tea or something? He said, sure. And what about your friend? What about you're learning with? And he tried to figure out, how is it possible that this Gentile can see the Magid? Shimusho gedola mitalmudo. The fact that she was, even though she was Gentile, mishamesh the chacham, was enough to give her the zechut to see the Magid. She thought he was a man. That's okay. And there are people who had Magid, didn't write about it, but they had Magid. Rav Yosef Karo wrote a whole book, Magid the Mesharim, of the Magid, what he learned in his dreams and from the Magid. So again, if you don't like the Ramchal, I'm not going to fault anybody. And just because the Chidah doesn't hold, right, doesn't bring him, lo ole lo morid. For me, it doesn't. And the Rambam was not appreciated by people of his generation either. And the Ramchal, if you read about how he suffered in his life, he wasn't appreciated by the rabbis in Padua or the rabbis in Amsterdam. Wasn't appreciated. And somehow the Gra writes, someone saw this, that on the day he received a copy of Adir Bamarom from the Ramchal, he dressed up in Bigdei Shabbat and Yom Tov. What am I missing? And Adir Bamarom is not Mesilat Yesharim, it's not Musar. It's discussing the Igra Rabbah, which is in the entire Lurianic Kabbalah system. It's mostly from there. Why would the Gra, the Gaon Mivilna, put Bigdei Shabbat for a book of the Ramchal if he's not quoting his sources? I love quoting the Gra because no Ashkenazi can say anything about the Gra. One of the greatest rabbis of the past 400 years. But yet the Gra is giving this tremendous homage to. So you take the Chidah versus the Gra. I'm sorry, on this situation. 100%. So continue. The Ramban said, we said the first 6 days of creation, there's inside the Torah the future of the world. Yes? We said that. Yes? Now let's go deeper. Also, Ramban. I forgot where it is. If you want, I'll find you the source. There's a machloket. No, that's what I just told you is in Breshit, clear, 6 days of creation, 6,000 years. Each day of creation corresponds to one of the millennia. Good. Now we'll go to another topic. Same topic, but a different taich. There's a machloket in the Gemara of how many books there are in the Torah. The accepted opinion, of course, is there are 5. That's why it's called a Chumash, from the language of Hamesh. But the Gemara I don't remember where it's in the Gemara, but if you look at Torah Tamimah, you can find it in 3 seconds. In Parashat, the Birkat Kohanim is in Naso Behalotecha. I think it's in, I don't know, I have to look it up. But one of those, either Naso Behalotecha, by the his Birkat Kohanim, and then it says Vayhi bin Sar as in Bahalotecha. Vayhi bin Saron Vayome Moshe Kuma Adonai V'Yafutzu Avecha Mipanecha Misanecha Mipanecha. Right. Then the next pasuk says Uvnochayim Ashuva Adonai Ruvot Afei Yisrael. Right. Those two pasukim have nunim that are upside down, before and after, and the Gemara tells us there's an opinion that says there are 7 books of the Torah. Hatzeva Amudea Shiv'a, not 5. And then Rashi brings this. There's a discussion why this is here. It's not in its right place. This should be with the Degalim. And Rashi says, Lavdil men puranut lepurnut. The puranut afterwards is pretty straightforward. That's the Yam Onim Rabbe Oznei Hashem. That's straightforward. What's the puranut before? What's the punishment before? Vayisume Hashem. What is Vayisume Hashem? That means they left God like Tinoka Barach Mibet HaSefer. That's Rashi. So there are 7 books of the Torah, because it says in the Gemara, this is a book that is Sefer Bifnei Atzmo. Yes? And it's Mistaber. Why should there be 7? There's 7 days, 6 days of creation, 7th day of rest, right? 7 is a very common number. There's 7 Sfirot, right, that make up the below the, right? So 7 is a very satisfactory number, okay, for there to be 7, and that's why it's called Sefer Bifnei Atzmo, from the language of Sefirah. Let's leave that alone. What's the Ramban's opinion? There are 6 books of the Torah. And what's his source? He doesn't have one. Okay. What does he say? Why there's 6? He says if you take a look at Breshit is 2 books, not 1. Why? Ze Sefer Toledot HaAdam. The first time we see the word Sefer is in Breshit. So he says the first part of Breshit, that's 1 Sefer. The second part of Breshit, which is Ze Sefer until the end of Vayechi, that's number 2. Shmot is 3, Vayikra is 4, Bemidbar is 5, and Devarim is 6. And then what he does is he calculates the parashot. In each Sefer, he says there are 10. Okay, you have to look at his calculation. Why 10? Not only is the Torah giving you a blueprint in the first day, 6 days of creation for how the world is going to be, the history of the world, the Torah is giving you a blueprint for creation for each millennia in the Sfarim of the Torah, and each 100 years is a parasha.
No, sorry, 100. Oh, to the 10.
Sefer
10 times 6
is 1,000. 10 parashot, 100 years times 10, and he leaves off with Zot HaBracha because that really doesn't have its own Shabbat at all. And he shows how each one of the parashot corresponds to it. So then he talks about his parasha, which would be Devarim, right? Which the first he was, I think, 5,000 to 5,100. People afterwards, because the Ramban thought the Mashiach was going to come, and unfortunately did not. We weren't worthy. I mean, he was right, but we weren't worthy. So who picks up the torch? The Gaon Mivilna. And he shows 51 to 52, 52 to 53, 53 to 54. To the point where they asked the Gaon Mivilna, you are the greatest rabbi we've had in whatever. Where is your name in the Torah? And it has to be in the parasha that you live in. Because if the Torah is telling me 100 years for each one, and the Gaon of Vilna is in this generation, in this 100 years, his name has to appear. The Gaon of Vilna died when? 1760, 1780? Maybe later? 18 something. Let's look at the time, okay? So it corresponds to Parashat Ki Tetzeh. And where is the Gaon of Vilna? Where does he say his name is? Even shelema v'tzedek yelach, efa shelema v'tzedek yelach, leman yarichun yamecha al ha'adama asher Adonai Elohecha noten lach. What is Even shelema?
That's his book.
What's his name?
Eliyahu.
Eliyahu ben Shlomo.
Evan.
Even Shlomo. Why is it his book? Even Shlomo. So when we understand histakel be'oraita ubara alma, it's not just 6,000 years ago. It's every single day. Now, let's just develop this further. What's that? No, he didn't. Parashat Ki Tavo corresponds to, when did Parashat Ki Tavo technically end? 1940. That wasn't a very good 100 years for the Jewish people. Yes? Why does that make sense? What does Ki Tavo talk about? Not so good for the Jewish people, right? So Parashat Ki Tavo corresponds from 1840 to 1940. Next parasha after Ki Tavo is Nitzavim. Nitzavim and Vayelech, Rambam puts them together because they're both very short and they're almost read all together. What is the topic par excellence of both of those parashot? If you had to pick one topic that Parashat Nitzavim and Parashat Vayelech are dealing with. No, Tochachatz Ki Tavo. That's why it's important to study Torah Shebichtav. והיה כי יבואו עליך כל הדברים האלה, הברכה והקללה אשר נתתי לפניך, והשב אותה אל לבביך בכל הגויים, אשר הדיחך אדוני אלוהיך שמה. ושבת עד אדוני אלוהיך ושמעת בקולו ככל אשר אנוכי מצווך היום אתה ובניך בכל לבביך וכל נפשך. What is talked about here? Teshuvah. That is the subject of Nitzavim and that is the subject of Vayelech. Now just examine. In the past 100 years, or from 1940 till now, that's what, 60 years? What has happened more than any other time in history?
Proliferation of Torah.
Tshuva! Children are teaching their parents to be Shomer Shabbat. Pum fakert the way it was for the past 2,000 years, where parents, instead of that, where children are asking their parents how to observe, parents are asking their children how to observe, and their grandchildren. No time in history like this. Nitzavim Vayelech. And the last parasha is Ha'azinu. And what is Ha'azinu? And when do you sing?
After you get Yeshua.
It's Shira. It's called Shira. When does a person sing?
When they're happy.
When they're happy. Is Ha'azinu about happy? What is Ha'azinu supposed to be? Ed. witness that whenever things are not going in the right direction, study Ha'azinu, you'll figure out why things went off the direction and how to get back. And how does Ha'azinu end? How does Ha'azinu end? Harninu go'im amo kidam avada vikom venakam yashiv letzara v'chiper admato amo. It's about kapara. When do we read Ha'azinu? Almost always.
By Yom Kippur.
By Yom Kippur. It's either Vayelech or Ha'azinu. These parashot are all about the teshuvah. Ha'azinu is so you can find your place where you made your mistake and fix it. So that's perhaps the 100 years of the Mashiach. Not that far away. Huh?
Zot HaBracha would be after.
Zot HaBracha is not part of the calculation because the Zot HaBracha is not. There's no Shabbat. So Zot HaBracha is.
Oh no, Shabbat when you read it because it's read on Simchat Torah.
Okay, Ha'azinu is the last.
Hazinu, everybody's name is in Hazinu.
Everyone.
Kol HaKavod, yes?
That's what I heard.
All right. Because we're all there. Because Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulechem. Yes, every Jew is needed. Baruch Hashem. So we understand that. So let's go back to what he says, and we'll finish up. I'm going to read it again with the context of what I just said. Because when I was reading it, that's what I was thinking about. What does it say here? Shehu Yitbarach Shemo Mashpia Be'olamot. He is Mashpia in the world. Kol Rega, every moment. The Shifat Or Hadash L'Kiyumam, and the Shefa of Or Hadash L'Kiyumam. Ulhan Higam, and to direct them. History repeats itself. Why? Because there's one manhig. Yudke Vavke. Lefi Hasedarim Shesider B'Shorshei Habiriah. What is he talking about here? Technically, this is not Parashat Teruma. It's Sidra Teruma. In the Torah, you have Parashat Petucha, you have Parashat Setuma. That's Halakha Moshe Sinai. Where the interruptions are, Petucha Setuma, that's from Moshe Rabbeinu on Sinai. The Sidra is when we call it Parashat Teruma, it's not Parashat Teruma. It's Sidra. Why is it called a Sidra? Because it's a seder of parashot.
In a certain order.
I think the rabbi here is, again, even Rabbi Katilia, if he learned this from the Rambam, I don't know. Maybe it's wrong. When he's talking about Sider B'Shoshei Bria, in the roots of the Bria, what is the roots of the Bria? What is the root of the world of the Bria? So what's the root?
The top of the next. What's the catcher of the world?
The world of the Atzilut is the root of the Bria, yes? World of the Bria, what's the world above? In the Kabbalistic terminology, something that's a root is a pinimi. Something that's is chitzon is what we're looking at, right? So the inside of the Bria, or shall we say the shorish of the Bria, is the Atzilut. Accepted or not accepted? Okay? And what is the Atzilut? It's always there. Only thing difference is that Tzimtzum allows it to be seen. The Keter of the Bria is the Malchut of the Atzilut. But we're looking at the entire world of the Atzilut, okay, with the exception of maybe the Malchut, okay? When we look at the entire world of the Bria, of the Atzilut, that world always existed, right? The difference is that it was, we said it before. Let's hold off Adam Kadmon, okay? Let's just focus on the Atzilut, okay? The Atzilut always existed, yes? It's godly. If it's godly, that means it always existed. Atzilut was not created. What's chadash about the Atzilut?
The method of which it can be seen.
Correct. What's chadash about the Atzilut is that it's given the ability to be seen. What gives the Atzilut the ability to be seen? The Tzimtzum. We good so far? Histakel be'oraita. What's oraita? Thank you. What else is it?
It comes from Atzilut, so it has
Oraita,
or,
Kudsha Brichu, and Yisrael Hadhu. So the Torah Shebichtav is from the Tiferet of the Atzilut, which really means it's Kadum, right? Because the Atzilut is Kadum. Histakel be'oraita ubara alma. So if a person wants to see the world, you look to the Tiferet. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he looked to the Sphira of Tiferet, what did he receive from that Sphira? Through Aspaklara and Mirah, what did he receive? The Torah. So in saying the Torah is from what and why does that make sense? Because the revealed will of Hashem is contained within the Torah. There's an unrevealed will of Hashem that we have no connection to, that has nothing to do with us. But the will that we just read about right now, the Ratzon of Hashem to create the world, is to be mashpia tuvo ba'olam. That's why the world's created. So the Torah being from the Tiferet should not be surprised, right? The Torah should not be surprised from the Tiferet, which is, and that's Shorshei Habriya. So I think what the rabbi is saying here, Lefi HaSidarim Shesider B'Shorshei Habriya, is either the Ramban is getting to the Ramban, or they were sharing the same idea, but not necessarily communicating with each other. It's Ruach HaKodesh, yes? We understand from here that through the Torah, a person can see the entire Bria and what's going to happen over the 6,000 years.
So we're in Vayelach right now?
And that's why there's a Midrash that says, let's see how we can understand this. Midrash says that if it wasn't for the Jewish people making Chet HaEgel, all they would have had was the Torah.
Oh, they wouldn't have a Mishkan, right?
And Sefer Yehoshua.
They wouldn't need Varim. They wouldn't need all these. Oh, because the conquering.
So perhaps, again, this could be completely wrong. I don't know. Maybe it's completely wrong. But based on that Midrash, how do we understand what happens after the Mashiach comes? Okay, Eliyahu is going to tell us. But if we want to, when Eliyahu tells us and we want to confirm it, what are we going to look? Maybe based on this Midrash, Sefer Yehoshua. Why would it say? Because remember, after we said Na'aseh v'nishma, what happened? Paska zohamata shel hanahash, which means what?
They're ready for redemption.
There was no more death going to happen to the Jewish people.
You're ready for...
Maskim? Yes, no? Am I saying something we don't know about?
They were kind of re'uyim.
I'll prove it to you. The Gemara says what happened, that 600,000 angels came and put two crowns, Masechet Shabbat. 600,000 angels came and put, each put one a crown on the Jewish person's head. So they had two groups of 600,000 angels, put crowns, two crowns on each Jew's head. When they said, Na'aseh v'nishma. What happened? When did the crowns leave? Het ha'egel. And what does it say by het ha'egel? Oh my gosh. A second. Second. Okay. ושלחתי לפניך מלאך וגירשתי את הכנעני והאמורי והחיתי והפריזי החיבי והיבוסי. What's going on over there? God is telling Moshe Rabbeinu that I'm not going to go with you close. I'm going to send a malach. And the malach is going to guide you from this point on. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't like that. So he objected. So what happened? Hashem changed it. Hashem said, okay, I'm going to go with you. Until when? What's one of the first things we read in the book of Yehoshua? Before that, before Yericho. Before Yericho.
You have to get them ready to cross the Jordan
They
River.
crossed the Jordan River, the man stopped falling, they did Korban Pesach, and then something happens. Yehoshua has an interaction with a malach. No. The malach. Who's that malach? That's the malach that Moshe Rabbeinu chased back to the Shamayim. That now that Moshe Rabbeinu is dead, that's the malach that's going to guide them as they're conquering the land of Israel.
Oh, there's an opinion of Orah Rambam that this malach is referring to afterwards.
Orah Chaim, thank you so much. Very good. Okay? So we see that this is the first thing that happens. The malach comes into contact with the malach. And this is the malach that was dismissed by Moshe Rabbeinu. And once Moshe Rabbeinu dies, returns to guide them, because the path of Moshe Rabbeinu with the closest of Hashem is not the same with Yehoshua. So of course, this is the first thing. El Erez Zavat Halav Udvash Ki lo ele b'kirbecha ki am keshe'oref ata penachelcha badarech. And Hashem says, why? This malach is going to guide you to the land of milk and honey, right? Because what's going to happen? Because if I go with you and you're a stubborn and stiff-necked nation, what's going to happen? You're going to make another mistake, I'm going to wipe you out. Straightforward pasuk, yes? וישמע העם את הדבר הרע הזה ויתאבלו ולא שתו איש עדיו עליו. What's going on there? So they didn't like this. They're going to have this distant relationship with God. They didn't like this. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't like it as well. What word is used? Vayit'abalu. What does that mean? Evel. Mourning. When do you mourn? When somebody dies. Who died? No, he's not dead here. He lives for on. What is this? And then we see later on the pasuk says, "Vayitnatzelu bnei Yisrael et edya mehar Horeb." They removed their crowns. So the Gemara discusses this, and it said by Heta Egel, 1.2 million Malachei Chabalah came. 600,000 put two crowns by Naasev and Ishma, and then Malachei Chabalah, one angel for each crown. 1.2 million came and removed the crowns. That's what it says in the Gemara. So in the Edyam is the crowns. What crowns? What crowns? And by the way, where'd the crowns go? They took the 1.2 million crowns. What did they do with them?
Put them in the ganus.
No.
Melted them.
Nope. This is spiritual. This is not
They
physical.
gave them to
There's
them.
no physical crown here.
They gave them something. Somebody.
Who got him? Moshe Rabbeinu.
He got the stones.
And when he came down with the crowns on his head, all 1.2 million crowns,
Oh, his face was
Kikaran or Panav.
They had to have the misveh.
What are these crowns? What does the Gemara say? The Rambam quotes this. What happens in the Olam HaNeshamot? Tzadikim yoshvim ve'itrotehem berashehem, and their crowns are on their head. V'nehenim miziv hashechina. What is itrotehem berashehen? What's that? Their wives? Okay, maybe Ateret Habayit, maybe. Okay, well, let's how do we? What's? So the crowns represent the Torah that was learned. And why is it Berashehem? Because the crown is obvious to everybody. So when a person goes to the Olam HaNeshamot,
All you have is the Torah that you asked.
the Torah that you've learned and studied and taught in your life is on your head for everybody to see. And what happens? Lila said there. Why they said there?
You say this, Rabbi Katan Mason,
We do? We don't say that. Where do you say there?
Oh, it's never got the Mason every year?
Arachman, who what? All right, we'll have to look at that. I didn't know. Let me finish my thought for a second, okay? So the atara that's on the person's crown is the Torah. It's called Keter Torah. Now imagine the humiliation a person has when they spent 80, 90, 100 years in Olam Hazeh, and they go to the Shamayim, and their crown is Shvach. The humiliation the person has is almost like a Gehenam.
But they're not there.
So now, what's going on here? So the Zohar says that by Na'aseh v'Nishma, Paska Zohamata shel HaNachash. The filth of the Nachash was removed from the Jewish people. When the filth of the Nachash was removed from the Jewish people, what does that mean? Nobody dies. That's called Tchiat HaMetim. What happened by Het HaEgel?
But their bodies are red. Do they have to die to come again?
I don't know. Let's leave that alone. What happened by Het HaEgel? First of all, their bodies were transformed by Har Sinai. What transformed about their bodies on Har Sinai? They're Jewish. They got a Jewish neshama. They had the chibesu simlotam. They had to make themselves tehorim, which means they became new mikved. They became mikved. Okay, spiritually, at least. I don't know. Physically, their bodies were probably the same. But what do we see from here? That vait abalu means evel, because what was going on here is they were going to die, and that was not changed. That Moshe couldn't change or didn't change. So they, for a brief period of time, between when they said Na'aseh v'Nishma, between Het HaEgel, 40 days, no Jew died.
When the Zohama came back?
The Zohama came back when the Zohama came back, then they mourned. And that's why that's why I use this Shashon, Vayit Abalu.
And it should say Vayit Ablu.
No, it should say they were etzev, they were sad. Why does it use the term Vayit Abalu? That is a unique word in Hebrew, evel, referring to mourning. Not just any sadness, but sadness connected to death. Who are they mourning? They were mourning for themselves that they were going to die.
And that's more why it's connected to a heat vowel verb. They kind of mourn themselves. Heat ablu.
They mourned for them. They mourned for them. So now, when I said the Midrash says if it wasn't for Het HaEgel, they would have received the Torah and Sefer Yoshua.
So all the 5 books of Moses plus Sefer Yoshua?
That's it.
But if they didn't do it, then where would you get Shittim and where would you get the Magafai here and the Magafai there? How would it be going the same?
I'm not following.
Why would they get Ha'azina? Why would they get Kitavo if they don't, there's no reason for Tochacha. Why would they need all those stories? Or you're saying the stories would change? Because it looks like the Torah is ending by Kitisa. Or sorry, it's by Yitro.
No, it's not ending. They're going to get all the Torah, all 5 books. The Midrash says, we have to understand the Midrash, all 5 books and Yoshua, which means they wouldn't have needed the rest of the Tanakh. They would not have needed the Torah Shebe'al Peh. They wouldn't need Mishnah. They wouldn't need the Gemara.
But why would they need the stories of the rest of the Torah if they're not sitting anymore?
I'm not so the stories is the issue. First of all, the stories contain with them the sod, so that would still be necessary, regardless.
The stories are the same, though?
Regardless of the stories are still there in order to tell us what happened, and also for us to learn sodot, to learn secrets from the Torah. Yes, but 1 second. Now I lost a train of thought.
I'm just struggling to understand. So it seems like the story is ending. Kitisa. They talk about the
okay, let's not conflate 2 things we said. One thing we said is
if they wouldn't have done Chet Egel.
Wouldn't a Chet HaEgel,
You still have Parshat
the
Kitisa.
Midrash says, the Ramban doesn't bring this when he discusses this, so he doesn't explain this. There would only been 5 books of Moses, and there only would have been Sefer Yoshua.
Okay, the Ram-
So what happened by the Luchot Shniot? In addition to getting Luchot, what they get?
they get the broken ones and the full ones are in the Aron.
What else did they get? They got
What?
Torah She Baal Peh. Ooh. Ooh. We don't have this in our Nusach. This is on Pesach or anytime?
No, I got there. Just pass it. Leila said it.
Harachaman hu. So after it says over here, this is I've never seen this before. It says here Rachaman hu yan chilenu. It's a Shabbat. Then it says since it's Yom Tov, Harachaman hu yan chilenu Yom shekulo tov. Then it continues on. Yom shekulo aroch. Yom shetzadikim yoshvim ve'atrotehem berashehem ve'nenim meziva shechina v'hi chelkenu imayim. Wow. Why isn't it in Pesach though?
It's assuming it's talking about Losid Loboy. Because that's what Rashi says.
Benisan nigalu benisan itayigael. Wow. Holy moly.
Torah is the Noshim. If she helped him to.
That makes beautiful sense. Right. But my nashan zachayan, right? How they have zichut and tikat metim by helping sending the husbands to learn and taking their children to learn. Very good. Wow, I never saw this before. This is beautiful.
Right. You don't have.
We don't have this in our Nusach. We do. We don't have this. It's not. If you look,
not the Sfard.
in Sephardic, it's not there. We don't have the Birkat Hamazon for Yom Tov. It's not there. Not in the Haggadah either. I've never seen that.
You never said the Ashkenaz Seder.
I've never in the Maxwell Coffee one. It's not there.
Yeah.
If it was in the Maxwell Coffee one, I would have seen
The
it.
Goldenberg, it's not.
Okay, this has to be.
Breslov.
Okay, that's so. That's why.
No, it's not only by him. Everybody.
So every machzor that I'm going to look, if I open up the art scroll and I look in the Pesach Haggadah, it's going to say. I'm going to add that. That's beautiful.
You're gonna add that to your
Yes.
into your Haggadah?
I'm going to see if I can. That's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful, and it
Wait,
fits.
can you add to blessing?
It's not a bracha.
Oh, it's a Rachaman.
It's a rachaman. You can add.
Okay.
Yeah, like you have by Sheva Brachot or by Brit Milah, you have the Rachman.
So let's just finish up and then we'll stop because it's very late already. Baruch Hashem, I can go on all day. Okay, all day. So the Midrash says the 5 books of Moses and Sefer Yoshua, right? Which means they wouldn't have needed the rest of the Tanakh, and they wouldn't have needed the Mishnah and the Gemara.
Now, what about the Zohar? It would have been already contained.
Why wouldn't they have needed the Torah Shebe'al Peh, specifically
Because they would
Mishnah?
have understood everything. They wouldn't have needed.
Because everything would have been written into their hearts, and they would have done the mitzvot, which means we don't. If we know what to do, we don't need anything else. The problem is that after Chet HaEgel, then Moshe Rabbeinu had to get Luchot Shniot, right? And what's the difference in Luchot Rishonot, Luchot Shniot? That's the Hartumim said that.
Wait. Ki habichtav michtavu.
Okay. So what do we see? Pesol lecha, right? What does that mean? That unlike the first Luchot, which were carved and written by Hashem, the second Luchot were written by Hashem but carved by Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how he got wealthy through the stones from the carving, right? Why? What's the symbolism of Moshe having to carve the Luchot out of the mountain? That's the Torah Shebe'al Peh. Because that's the only way to God. Hashem told Moshe, you have to work to get the Luchot out. I'm going to write it on the Luchot, just like I did for the first Luchot. But in the first Luchot, I'm going to separate them from the mountain. The second Luchot, you have to do the work, which means because of the degradation after Het HaEgel, now Torah is not going to come easy. You have to work for it. Right? Pat b'melach tochal. It's going to require work. If it was only the Chumash and the Torah was burned into our hearts and we didn't need the Gemara because we understand all of the halachot, then there's no work to be done. But because we made Het HaEgel, Tchiat HaMetim, the death came back to the world. Therefore, now we have to work in order to understand the Torah. There's a rabbi, his name is Rabbi Tzadok Milublin, with a wonderful sefer called Pri Tzadik. Amazing. Brilliant. Brings Midrash, brings Zohar, brings what?
The same guy's a Lublin?
On the Chumah. He he's a perush on the Torah. It's not a perush. It's really on each parasha and the holidays. It's a well-known Hasidic sefer. I'm going to say, what does he say? He brings this whole thing I'm talking about, and one of the common things he says is Rov Torah because of Rov Kaas. Rov Torah, which counteracts Rov Kaas. Kaas, anger. Hashem by Har Sinai was Kavyachol, angry with the Jewish people. So how do we fix that? And because remember, Het HaEgel, what does it say? God wanted to wipe us out in one shot. Moshe Rabbeinu prayed that he shouldn't wipe us out in one shot, right? Does that mean the punishment was removed? No. Instead, it was spread out over all the generations. And that's why the Gemara says, our rabbis teach us, that anytime there's a punishment that happens to the Jewish people, there's a little extra for Het HaEgel. Which means if we deserve to get this type of makkah, chas v'shalom, there's a little extra. Why? Het HaEgel. Which means, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do with the egel? He took it, he burned it, crushed it up, and basically spread it out in the water and gave them to drink. Meaning what? I'm going to distribute the punishment for this over all the generations. What does that remind us of? That reminds us of Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon made the sin. And what did Hashem do? Okay, I'm going to now, instead of be able to finish the world's work in 1 or 2 or 3 hours, L'ovda l'shomra, now you're going to get 6,000 years. And that's why death is needed, because you can't live for 6,000 years. That's be new people. So therefore, death comes because Hashem extended the time he can do the tikkun. He extends over here the punishment of Het HaEgel. I want to destroy them all. So not in one shot, but I'm going to distribute over the course of history. Het HaEgel. Adam HaRishon, we already have it. It's called this, the body that we have is defective. Okay? And the neshama does not have the power to overcome the body. There's 2 factors. There's one, the body itself is defective. And the second one is the neshama does not have the power to overcome the defect of the body. If the neshama did, then it would be Tchiat HaMetim right now. Coming back. So Het HaEgel caused there to be Kaas. Heref mimeni v'ashmidem. What's the compensation for that Kaas? Rov Torah. What's Rov Torah? Mishnah, Gemara. This is Rov Torah. And that's what Rabbi Tzadok Milublin says. He quotes its Midrash. Rov Torah, Yeneged Rov Kaas. I forgot the exact Lashon, but they're vis-a-vis. And it makes sense in another way, because what is a person who has Kaas all the time? Muftach lo she lo yihye ben olam haba. A person has Torah, muftach lo shehu ben olam haba. Vis-a-vis. Kaas, Torah. Moshe gets angry, forgets the Torah. Ki'ilu oved avodah zarah. When a person gets angry. What's the compensation? Shabbat and Torah. Okay.
With the antidote.
The antidote. Sorry, better term, the antidote, not the compensation. Mara says clearly, person is oved avodah zarah, like Enosh. Shmirat Shabbat is fixing that. But a person can't be Shomer Shabbat unless he's studying Torah. How do you know what to do? So, Barati Yetzahara, Barati lo Torah Tavlin. So the Yetzahara caused the Kaas, the Torah is the Tavlin, and Shabbat is the antidote for Avodah Zarah. But we see this concept of Rov Kaas. And therefore, there's Rov Torah. And that's why we have the Torah. That's why first Luchot is Torah and Sefer Yoshua. Now coming back, why Sefer Yoshua? I never understood this. Why Sefer Yoshua? Maybe continue what the Ramban said, even though he didn't write it. So I'm not. It's my idea. It could be wrong 100%. Maybe just like we look at the Ramban and he said about the book, the 5 books is telling you about the world, right? Maybe Sefer Yoshua is a remez, or we learn from Sefer Yoshua what's going to happen when we have the Mashiach.
I think I saw somewhere it says that Kol HaRefuos is in Sefer Yoshua.
Where'd you see that? What's a kol harefuos? Oh, healing?
Kol HaRefuos.
If you could find that, I'd love to look at that.
What do you mean all the healing?
I don't know. I have to see what that says.
Yeah.
All right, we will stop here. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen. Wow. Holy moly.
It's one of our records, right?
Yeah, this is a record. 4